Chair Burnsick? I believe we have everybody on the line this morning.
Great. Do we need to do a roll call?
Let's do, just to be on the safe side, make sure everybody's still connected. So Chair Burnsick?
Here.
Okay. Curator Chapman?
Here.
Curator Graham?
Here.
Curator Hobrock?
He stepped out just for a minute.
Okay. Curator Lehman?
Present.
Curator Snowden?
Here.
Curator Steelman?
Here.
Curator Winokur?
Here.
Curator Williams?
Here.
All right, and then we also have Student Representative Welker with us this morning, President Choi, General Counsel Owens, and then the university leaders. Chair Burnsick, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Cindy. All right, well, before we get started with today's general business, I wanted to acknowledge that today is Juneteenth. And Juneteenth marks the date 155 years ago, in 1865, that Union soldiers landed and shared news that enslaved people were now free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So it is obviously commemorating Black freedom today. And with the national dialogue being focused on the treatment of Black Americans, I want to take a few minutes. And just a reminder to everyone, I forgot to mention this at the very outset, if you wouldn't be speaking at the moment, if you'd put your phones on mute, that would help, because I know we've got a lot of people on the line. So with today's national dialogue being focused on the treatment of Black Americans, I want to take a few minutes to acknowledge that there is more work to be done to support respectful, inclusive environments at our 4 universities. And I know I speak for the board, the president, and all of the leaders in place when I say we are wholly committed to these efforts. So I'd like to invite Curators Chapman and Williams, followed by others if they wish, to share any thoughts about how we can continue to improve our learning and working environments. So Curator Chapman, I'll turn to you first.
Thank you, Julia. Juneteenth is an opportunity to celebrate and rejoice on progress, but it's also an opportunity to acknowledge there is always more work to be done. I think all of us can agree on that. Today, faculty, staff, and students from our universities are participating in events to celebrate Juneteenth. I encourage this participation by all of our colleagues to take time for personal reflection, self-assessment, and understanding how everyone plays a part in creating a more inclusive environment. Michael?
Thank you, Curator Chapman. I think the important thing for us to remember is that the thing that makes our university and our community better is all of our differences. Whether it's from your race, your creed, color, your background, it all makes us unique. And by sharing our experiences with each other, that's what will make us stronger. So being able to listen to people that are different than you, being able to talk to people that are different from you, and learning from their experiences will all make us a better community.
Thank you. Anyone else like to add anything? Okay. All right, let's turn to the general business. Last, I guess, regularly scheduled board meeting, we committed to, after we voted Moon to be the interim president and chancellor for Mizzou, we committed to doing some additional work to evaluate other models in other systems. And we appointed Curator Williams to lead that effort, which he has done a great job of. And before I turn it over to Curator Williams to give us an update on the progress that he has made in that regard, I want to thank him very much for a huge amount of work in a short amount of time on the board. And he has done it so with such a great attitude and always a willingness to take calls and work later and be available. And I just really appreciate him for taking this on. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And I think you're on mute.
Some would say I do much better when I'm on mute. You know, as the board started looking at the restructuring and trying to figure out how to be, don't like this phrase, but to do more with less, meaning we had to be more efficient with our administration, but we had to make sure that we're still providing a quality education for our students and that we're focusing on all of our campuses, collaborating to bring in as much research as possible. And so I think when we talked about that and decided that, we looked at doing two steps. One, we hired two of the best experts we could find, and I'll give you, they'll come on later, but I'll give you a little bit about their background in a minute. But we hired those two experts from AGB to not only look at what our citizens thought, i.e. interviewing members of the university community to find out what they were thinking, but also to look at systems that could be similar or that might be different and telling us the strengths or the weaknesses of those systems so that we could then evaluate what would be best going forward. I want to emphasize that no choice has been made, and that's why we have these two gentlemen here today to speak to us about that. And I'll tell you a little bit about our experts. One of them is Terrence McTaggart. Dr. McTaggart, will you wave? He's up in the top corner. One, he's had the pleasure of working with our system before. Two, he's written, one of the foremost experts. He served as the president of university systems, served in colleges all over the country, has written books. And he can tell you a lot more about his background when he speaks. And Mr. Novak, will you wave? There you go. Rich also is seen as one of the foremost authorities in governance of colleges and universities. And so these two gentlemen got together, not only interviewed people from all four campuses, but then they looked at systems that could be similar or dissimilar and came back, and they're going to talk to us today about the strengths and weaknesses of different alternatives for us. And as a board, we met with making sure we wanted to listen to our constituents. We held meetings with different groups representative groups from all the campuses. And I know a lot of curators took individual calls or had individual meetings with groups that are in their area. Why? Because we wanted to listen. We want to understand if we are going to make a change in the system or restructure the system at all, we want buy-in from all four campuses because we want this to be a university system where we all work together and not just separate, entities that collaborate on some things. And so with that backdrop, I'm going to let Dr. McTaggart and Mr. Novak kind of take us through the report, and that report has been published. So anyone who's seen the materials can see that the report is there for you to read. Take it away, Dr. McTaggart.
Okay, thank you all very much, particularly Curators Burnsick, Chapman, and Williams for reminding us how important this day is and the work ahead of us. Thank you. It's the right way to start off a meeting like this. From a personal point of view, it's great to be talking to friends and colleagues in Missouri again. My only regret is that we're not seeing each other face to face. Allow me to kind of introduce the report a bit. We're going to rely largely on slides, which call attention to what we think are the items that you'll be most interested in. But at any time you have a question about the details of the report or the process or whatever, please don't be shy. Let me just underscore something that Curator Williams said, and that is to do with the purpose of the report. To be sure, it's to find more cost-effective ways of doing business through some kind of restructuring. Equally important, though, is to keep up the quality of the business, the research productivity, access to students, inclusion, the half dozen or so top priorities that you as the governing board of the University of Missouri system have endorsed. So if we were just to save money and sacrifice those other things, that would be unfortunate. and wouldn't be fulfilling your purposes.
Terry, this is Steelman. Can I ask you to comment on that a little bit as we start? And I know you're not surprised that I'm already talking, but we try to divide those, and we do it all the time in higher education. And you just said, first, cost effective, but two, equally important is to keep up the quality. Yeah. And I would like you just for a minute to talk about the challenges, or in my mind, the impossibility of keeping up the quality without making cost effective reforms, because we get pinned into a position, particularly by people of these constituency groups. Well, it's not about money, it's about education. I want you to comment on the interrelationship and whether you can have one without the other.
Maybe a couple of points on that, and be happy to follow up if you like. One of them is a friend of mine in this enterprise says, no market, no mission. It's pretty hard to accomplish your fundamental purposes, quality, access, research, productivity, if you haven't got the resources to do it. And if too many of those resources are going to attractive but not essential administrative functions, then something is out of balance. And all of this is, as you know, every bit as well as I do, is intensified by the economic consequences of COVID-19. A. B, in higher ed, in most organizations actually, but higher ed probably in particular, there's a tendency to equate the current way of operating with the right way to operate. And so the legacy is pretty resistant to change. And what I think is you'll see as we go through this report, and particularly from Rich's comments about other first-rate universities and university systems that have a more integrated system and frankly have maintained very high quality and high rankings and the other measures of quality. So I don't think there's an inconsistency between reducing unnecessary costs or non-essential costs and high quality. And in fact, maybe shaking things up will contribute to higher quality still, and we'll give some examples of that as we go along.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the question, because it does deepen the relationship, the interdependent relationship between quality, just to use a shorthand, and cost reductions. The other thing I would mention by way of introductions before going to a little bit about our interviews is that this report goes out of very much the 2018 governance report, that task force chaired by Curator Chapman, in which you reinforced a strong executive model for system leadership. And our, not recommendations, but our commentary reinforces that general direction. Questions addressed, that's included in an appendix to the report. Let me say here, though, that we provided a combination of what were the broad goals for the system, and to a person, everyone talked about the financial exigencies, small e, that you're facing. We asked them about the interim combination of the president and chancellor's position. And I would say they're not universal, but general appreciation of that model, with some serious questions and qualifications, which we'll air when we go through the pros and cons of each of the models we presented. And we also left it kind of open-ended at the end, and no surprise to you, the curators we spoke with, the president, the chancellors, senior staff, were not shy in telling us what they thought we needed to hear, whether it responded to a particular question or not. So that, maybe I could ask Val to put up that first slide. Or Cindy. And if that becomes a stumbling block, we can just work our way through it absent them. But
Are you able to see the slide deck now?
can you put up the one that says interview subjects? I guess it's the second one, Val, excuse me. There you go. Okay, that was bullet one that I just talked about. Let me ask my colleague, Rich, to provide a little commentary on the second bullet.
Thank you, Terry, and it's very nice to be with you and the Board of Curators. It's been a while since I've been in Missouri, but my memories of being there are quite positive. Let me talk a little bit about, before I talk about the economic and other factors favoring restructuring, I was struck by a comment by one of the interviewees. I can't recall who it was, but someone said, you know, through all of this, we have to remember that who our primary constituents and stakeholders are. Citizens of the state of Missouri and our students. And whatever structure we devise or agree to, let's ensure that that structure continues to serve the citizens of the state and the students of the University of Missouri system. In terms of economic and other factors favoring restructuring, you know the story better than us. As in many states and public university systems around the country, the combination of slower growth, a declining pool of college-age residents, declining state financial support, and of course the consequences of COVID-19 that Terry referenced, all of those are making the next years challenging, not only for the University of Missouri system, but for many systems around the country. As you and your board colleagues know, in other states in similar circumstances, these trends support the case for some dramatic changes in university systems and individual freestanding universities as well, in terms of the business they do, in terms of student affordability, student access, gains in student success, and gains in research productivity. If those successes and those gains are to be sustained, the way universities do business and the way they organize themselves is likely going to have to change. Whether we see the 25% reduction in institutional failure rate predicted by the late Clayton Christensen of the Harvard Business School obviously remains to be seen. The most vulnerable institutions appear to be non-selective private schools with small endowments that are highly dependent on tuition and have high tuition discount rates of 50% or more, which means that half of their tuition revenue that they gain is refunded into institutional aid grants to entice those students to enroll and continue to enroll. In terms of the University of Missouri, again, you know the story. The growth rate in the college age and younger adult populations over the next decade will be sharply lower than in earlier years. Competition for these students will be intense from other state providers, the other state institutions, the regional institutions, as well as from aggressive out-of-state online providers. We were told that state financial support for the system is reported to have declined from 70% of operational revenues to 30% today. We note the 2019 State Higher Education Finance Report issued by the State Higher Education Executive Officers, which shows that of the 50 states, Missouri has the largest decline in total revenues from tuition dollars, state appropriations, and other state support. That's per full-time student, and that's a decline of almost 14%. Measured in constant dollars. The decline in state revenues is obviously accentuated by the economic consequences of the response to COVID-19 and has led to more substantial cuts in state support for this fiscal year, as President Choi told us about. In addition, the MU healthcare system, which we learned is a vital source of revenue for the system, has no doubt experienced declines in revenues due to lower elective surgeries, fewer patients seeking preventive care, and routine exams. The precise impact on the pandemic on enrollment is unclear. Nationally, some have said that it's going to be a 20 or 30% decline in fall arrivals. I think that remains to be seen. We know that you are closely monitoring the pandemic and all aspects of it, and that you hope your institutions and you're planning for your institutions to welcome students in the fall semester. We also note in the written report that all of these external factors, evident nationally, are leading to trends in systems towards greater centralization of authority, consolidation of administrative services and backroom operations, campus mergers in some states, proposed or actual, rigorous program review and program eliminations, and in some cases, consolidation of academic programs. And we give some examples in the report. And as we say in the report in this section, the higher education systems that operate efficiently, maintain tuition affordability, have a substantial online presence, and are composed of well-branded institutions in or near population centers are expected to be well-positioned for the future. So I hope that well-positioned description characterizes the University of Missouri system, and I'm sure it will. Terry, I want to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Rich. Val, if we could go to the next slide, please. There we go. What we thought we'd do now is fairly quickly run through the 6 models that we present. Whenever you choose to move forward, if indeed you do, you might think of some hybrid of these, but in all likelihood, if you do choose to change, it'll be one of these. Let me underscore the point that Curator Williams said, that it's not our job to recommend one. If you were to ask, we'll give you our opinion, but our job at this stage of the game is just to say, here's some of the choices that make sense for you to consider. After I run through these, we'll take them one by one, pointing out at least what we feel the strengths and weaknesses, advantages and disadvantages of each are. Option A would be the existing model that is without the combination of the Chancellor and the President, with relatively limited consolidations. How would you save money doing that? You just have to rely on what's sometimes called the revenue theory of cost. You provide schools with less money, and that's what their budgets will adjust to. But it's not a particularly strategic choice. A model B would be, again, the model with 4 chancellors and reporting to a president, but substantial consolidations. A little later on, we'll talk about 2 dimensions of those consolidations: administrative, managerial, technical on the one hand, and academic on the other. The former being difficult to pull off, but a lot easier to achieve than the academic consolidations. Item C is to take away the interim designation from President Choi's identification as the chief executive for Mizzou, to unite those positions more or less permanently, and with limited consolidations. Okay, not too much change in the business operations. I characterize that one as 1 leader, 2 jobs. Okay, as if they were, fairly separate enterprises and activities. D for dog is the combined position, but taking advantage of that combination to make substantial consolidations on the administrative side, in particular between what the system does and what the largest campus or university in the system does. E would be to combine the 2 positions, president and chancellor, but seek not just to have combined administrations at the system level and at Mizzou, but throughout the system. That is a more complicated enterprise, and it certainly is, as we'll mention later, if the board chooses to make any changes, they could pick, for example, D and think about E at a later stage. Kind of one major project at a time. And then F, which is an awful lot like E. All of these are moving in the direction of greater, what we'll call later, unity of command, if I might say. And that would be to add a title to the chancellors as system vice presidents. Now, your regulations describe chancellors as system officers anyway. So you expect them to be, fully participating in with the president and under the direction of the president in strategy setting and so on. This kind of change, which a number of systems have done, underscores the systemic character and the centrality of the system. A little later in our presentation, we'll suggest some of the downsides to going that far, frankly, and raising the question of how necessary is it. But those are the 6 models that we'll be teeing up for you, and I suspect that this will amount to the meat of our conversation. Rich and I have divvied up the spoils, and he'll address A and B, and then I'll address the remainder. Rich?
Thank you, Terry. Valerie, the next slide, please. As Terry mentioned, option A is the existing, or if you want to say pre-existing structure with the system president to whom 4 chancellors report and with limited administrative or organizational change. That's been the model since the founding of the system and prior, of course, to the interim arrangement with President Choi. The option envisions, again, limited academic or administrative consolidations other than those that are already underway. Of the 6 options we have presented here, this is the one, and I think Terry said this, option A presents the least change of all the 6 options. The advantages, again, it's the familiar model dating from 1963. There's less interruption of integration already in progress and consolidations already in progress. It continues the historic balance of power within the system and among the institutions of the system. Disadvantages, it potentially perpetuates structural conflicts. Most conflicts or many conflicts in systems occur between the system president and the chancellor of the flagship institution, sometimes with other institutions as well. But a disadvantage is this could perpetuate those conflicts. Another disadvantage, the costs and uncertainties of a chancellor search, as that position is obviously vacant. The cost of a chancellor's salary and benefits. These are not insubstantial. They can be quite substantial in a main research university. It limits the opportunity for greater integration of administrative services. Limits opportunity for greater integration of academic programs. Doesn't mean they can't occur, but we think it limits the opportunity for more integration that could take place. And the last disadvantage, it potentially limits the response to COVID-19. It might complicate quick, flexible, consistent responses across the institutions to the pandemic.
This is Curator Holbrook. Can I ask a question at this point?
Sure, absolutely.
Would you elaborate on the perpetual structural conflicts?
Yeah, I think in a lot of systems in which you have a diversity of institutions, and that's quite frankly the situation across the country, there are very few what we call segmental systems where all of the institutions have similar missions. There's really, I think, if I'm correct, Terry, there's about 8 systems, maybe 9 or 10 in the country where all of the institutions are basically the same. University of California, all research universities, California State with all teaching in regional institutions, the University of Nebraska State College system of 3 or 4 state teachers colleges, and a few others. And it's when you have, I think, a diversity of missions that you can have conflicts that are sometimes inevitable, sometimes creative conflicts, quite frankly, of which some good strategies emerge. But when you have a diverse group of institutions, it makes it harder, I think, for peace in the valley sometimes because of the diversity of institutions.
But unless we go all the way to the last example where we're combining everything about academia and administration, all the other models are still going to have this structural conflict built in?
Potentially, we think as we talk about the other options, we'll give the reasons why we think some other potential options can minimize those. But yes, there's always the potential for conflict when you have diverse institutions. And again, conflict isn't always bad. I mean, institutions are always fighting for a large degree of autonomy and self-direction. And sometimes that autonomy can conflict with overall system strategic plans or strategic direction, or again, the need for an immediate response, a consistent response among all institutions for a system-wide initiative, be it a response to COVID-19, be it a response to a need to enroll and educate more students, be it a response to have a more responsive research program among the institutions with greater collaboration.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, can I follow up on that a little bit? Was there any effort, and this would get a little more difficult, to link, and there are ways to measure successes of universities. There's rankings. I don't know if those are perfect. There's research expenditures. It's just my opinion, but I think there are you can go to the Times higher ed rankings and things like that and find evidence of this, that the University of Missouri at Columbia, in its relative ranking vis-a-vis other great universities in the country or in the world, has declined either in rankings since the system was formed or in research expenditures vis-a-vis not just absolute numbers, but competitively. And I have a twofold question. The first one is, has there been any discussion or any effort to get data and collate that so it's just not one curator's opinion? And the other problem is, I know where the rankings have gone in Missouri because I can remember them and have looked at them. I don't think there has been a subsequent uptick in the other universities. In fact, I live in Raleigh, and I can tell you, again, it's gone up and down, and we're back on our way up on many things. But in Raleigh, there's no question that 40 years ago, maybe it's even longer, that Raleigh School was considered one of the great engineering mining schools in the country, and that has had a problem. So with that long-winded preamble, has there been any effort to look at the data and the results and whether the formation of the system has been good or bad for the various institutions?
I'll let Terry answer your question as well, Curator Stillman. I looked only at research data that's referenced in the report that is an annual study done by the University of Massachusetts and I believe the University of Florida. It used to be done by Arizona State. It's by a gentleman named John Lombardi, who himself was a university provost and president at the University of Florida and later a system executive in Louisiana and in Massachusetts. And what his group does is a very comprehensive look at the top research universities of the country. They don't rank them, 1 through 50, but they do try to look at all of the factors that go into what they call a top research university. It includes foremost the accumulation of federal research dollars. It also includes all private research dollars. These are self-reported by institutions. It includes the number of PhDs in the faculty. It also includes some undergraduate things such as SAT scores and the size of the university foundation. Anyway, Mizzou ranks in the top 50. Again, they don't rank them 1 through 50. They rank them sort of grouped together. I did note that, in terms of federal research dollars, Mizzou maybe ranks a little bit lower than the top 50. In 2016, I think it was something like $238 million. But and I didn't look at the other institutions. But your other question, so I think sure, there's always room for expanded research support. And again, about this study, which is 2018 and only looked at 2016 research dollars.
Okay, so but so I understand you didn't attempt to keep going, but you did not show that over a period of time, 10, 20,
no, it did not.
years. Okay.
The only thing I would say, the last thing I would say about it is the next gen health science, healthcare initiative, which is really quite, I think, quite exciting. 2016 report would not capture those dollars, particularly the dollars from the private sector and from private foundations and from philanthropy that would not be in the 2016 ranking. So it's very possible that the university and the whole system would rise in the rankings.
Okay, thank you.
Let me comment, Curator Stillman, if I might. It's a great question, and it's frequently alleged that the system drains away resources from the premier historic research-intensive institution. And I frankly have no doubt it's sometimes true. However, if you look at California, the University of California system, those are the top-ranked publics in the country, and they pretty much stayed there. And by general acknowledgement, while, as you say, rankings are imperfect, over time, if they're consistent, they do send a message. Look at Michigan. University of Michigan has a system, Rich will talk about that a little bit later. It's always in the top 3 of the public research universities. Say similar things about Chapel Hill, part of the University of North Carolina system. The University of Houston system, which was, it would have to say kind of middle of the pack until it got its current president, has been moving upward, and it's a system. And I know the intentions are the same at Rutgers, which also has a relatively new hard-driving chief executive. So from my point of view, at least, the punchline as to whether a institution rises in the rankings, we use as a proxy for prestige and quality and so on, or not, has to do, frankly, more with resources, money, and the quality of leadership and the commitment of the president and the board to advance on those measures of distinctiveness. So without having done a systematic study, and I don't know, there's so many variables, of course, it may be hard to come to conclusions. My experience tells me that great systems can nurture and build great institutions, as California has shown.
It's interesting. I would comment there. It's just the interesting part of California is that is actually almost the opposite of what we've tried to do because they're the president. My understanding is, Terry, you know better than me, has almost fully external relations, and the chancellors are very independent on their campuses. And in fact, the chancellor's jobs are all higher paying, and frankly, even with Janet Neapolitano as president, are usually within their own schools, et cetera, and communities are higher, have higher visibility. Would you comment on that?
I would say that's true, and I think there are a couple of factors to think about that. Rich mentioned earlier that most systems have different kinds of institutions. You've got S&T, you've got 2 urban universities, you've got the highly research-intensive Mizzou. So that within the higher ed family, there's a fair amount of diversity there. All the schools in California are just top-ranked research universities. So there's, in a sense, the culture holds them together. They don't need to have as influential an executive as in some other places. So I guess that would, another point on this we'll make a little later, but let me just suggest it now. And it ties into Curator Holbrook's comment earlier. Can you construct a system and a culture of leadership that combines entrepreneurial, aggressive, proactive, energetic, future-oriented, market-oriented campuses with highly effective administrative, cost-effective central control? We labeled it the effective system entrepreneurial university combo. We'll see what you think, but we think that's an idea worth pursuing. The opposite of that is where the all of the authority rests in the central function. And the heads of the campuses are kind of branch managers. And I won't go into some of the other features of that, except to say the branch managers tend not to be entrepreneurs in this business. There's a tendency to sort of kick the tough calls upstairs to the system. And it's another model, but I guess I would argue that it wouldn't serve Missouri all that well. Our goal here would be, I believe, to give the curators the choice of saying, yes, we can have highly cost-effective, efficient, get rid of duplication, consolidate where it makes sense, operations on the one hand, but we also want our chancellors to have enough freedom to interact with their various markets successfully and grow their institutions in revenue and quality as well.
Which model is that?
Great question. I think it'll work almost with any of them, but it tends to fall more on the ones in the middle of the pack there.
Should we go to option B? Valerie, the next slide. Option B is a variation of option A in the sense that the historical structure stays in place with a president and 4 chancellors reporting to him or her. It does suggest substantial change in administrative and academic operations, and that distinguishes it from option A. Advantages, familiar model dating back from 1963, continues this historic balance of power between the centralization of a system that Terry was talking about versus institutional autonomy. Does support acceleration of integration of services. That again is a very different advantage than what we had said in option A. It does free the chancellors from some administrative responsibility. If you have more centralized administrative services that are conducted at the system level, there are some responsibilities that are alleviated for institutions and their chancellors. There's modest cost savings relative to option A, again, because of greater administrative and academic operations being conducted in the system office, economies of scale, if you will. Disadvantages, there's less unity of command to affect change since 2 people are making decisions basically that affect Mizzou that might interfere with that unity of command. Structural conflicts hinder integration. Again, the continued push for institutional autonomy could lead to some institutions saying, look, we don't need that needed integration or consolidation that the system is pushing for. A strong chancellor at Mizzou could result in conflicts with the system president. Again, many systems that is the case where the flagship again feels leveled down, or the main institution feels leveled down by the system office and feels that sometimes they're disadvantaged in the either funding formula or in the allocation process of the budget when it comes back from the state to the institutions. A weak chancellor could lose support from the campus community. That's a risk at all institutions, quite frankly. And another disadvantage is it may reduce campus independence. The research institution of many systems, again, feels constrained or leveled down, or feel that entrepreneurship is constrained by the system's need for balance and equity with other institutions of the system. Often the case in systems that are consolidated by legislation, it's a forced marriage, if you will, and there's always some residual resentments or conflicts that have to be dealt with in a system, again, where you have a system president and individual chancellors reporting to that president. So it should be said, and we do say this in the report, that despite all these disadvantages we've talked about for option A and B, the administrative structure of a system executive some places called president, some places called chancellor, in which the campus heads, chancellors or presidents as they are called, report to. That structure in options A and B is and remains the predominant model in the approximately 50 university systems around the country. So something in that model and those models is working correctly. If 50 systems, as what Mizzou has done too historically, have that model. What Terry and I are saying, however, is with all of these changes afoot, historic changes, flip-flopping state appropriations, the percentage of state appropriations that comprise university budgets, the greater dependence on tuition revenue, the great hope and the great sometimes risk of educational and educational technology, which makes competition and makes delivery of education so different than it was when most of us of our generation went to college. It's just a different ball game. So all of those factors go into, as we say, all systems sort of rethinking how they're organized, how they deliver education, how they build their cost structures, and how they relate to the states. As one of my mentors, Stan Eikenberry, who had been the president of the University of Illinois system and also president of the American Council on Education, said, you know, many public universities, many state universities are less state, but no less public. And I think that's a phrase that carries a lot of resonance with these university systems who are going through these dramatic changes. Back to you, Tim.
Could I ask another question here? I'm getting as bad as David Steelman about butting in. And I'm gonna ask you guys, because you've worked at the university. I'm not sure I understand the history very well, so I'm gonna ask for a clarification here. Where it says a strong chancellor at MU could result in a conflict with system president. I have been told that has been a problem historically with the model we've been under. You guys have worked at the university before. I assume you've looked at the history. Can you elaborate on that? What problems that has presented at the university system, the Missouri University system?
I will defer to Terry, but maybe also some of the other curators might be better able to say that as well. But Terry, do you have a word about that?
Yeah, Curator Hobrock, I don't know enough about the Missouri system to comment in an informed way, but I will on other situations. I've been in that situation in Maine where I headed up the system. The University of Maine was about a 20-minute drive from the system headquarters. And I think maybe the most important thing that to recognize is that it's not just an ego-driven chancellor of a campus or a system head who wants to be dominant. These organizations are political and economic entities. They have every institution to one degree or another has the local political support, which obviously enough play out in the legislature, play out in the funding, play out in those respects. And typically the historic University of Missouri, University of Maine institution with maybe hundreds of thousands of alumni is a very powerful entity. And sometimes the head of the campus, whatever their title is, can lead that group. And sometimes that group leads whoever's head of the campus. That phenomenon probably plays out in Missouri as well. So what it takes is not just a system head who's got the kind of formal authority, but also who's got the savvy, the political adroitness, the ability to harmonize the agenda of the main campus. It's also true if you've got a growing urban campus, which we had in Maine as well, into an agenda that makes sense for the state and the system as a whole. So it's not just a managerial job. Frankly, it includes strong elements of being a kind of political boss. and being adroit on that score. Let me stop there. I have a hunch you've got more questions either underneath that or this response hasn't been quite done the trick. But Rich kind of, in my view, was very discreet in describing the structural conflicts. They're in every damn system I've ever been involved with, whether I was working in it, leading it, or studying it. The question is, as Rich pointed out, how do you harmonize those inevitable conflicts so the product is not just a compromise to keep peace in the valley, but is something positive for the people of the state. One other,
you have
quick. Okay, I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, an example of where it wasn't working about, I'll say roughly 10 years ago, was when the head of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, okay, the major research university in that system. They have another one in Milwaukee that's significant, but Madison is the big kahuna. They tried to lead Madison out of the system, believing that they would achieve higher levels of greatness, and it is one of the top universities in the country without the system. That's where the sort of political equation failed, and it ultimately the board and the will of the state was, and the legislature was not to allow that to happen. Better still if you don't come to that kind of civil war, but instead you find an intelligent way to harmonize the agenda of the campus with what makes sense for the state.
No, I have no other agenda. I just wanted to see if you could comment on that, or if anybody else wants to comment on the past conflicts I've heard scuttlebutt about on this university, primarily this campus. So I happen to be sitting at Mizzou's campus right now, so that's why I said this campus.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to get a little more perspective on the rumors.
I think talking to insiders about that is where you'll get the real stuff.
Greg, we can talk further, but when I went on the board, and Don Cups, who some of the curators know well, really wonderful gentleman and a great curator, he was rolling off. So he'd been on there 4 years before I went on. And I knew this had been going on for a while, but he tells stories where the University of Missouri Board of Curators and the president made directives to the University of Missouri-Columbia campus. And the University of Missouri-Columbia campus said, we don't have to listen. That's the system, not the campus. Now that is maybe an extreme version, but that was a common theme, and Terry might comment whether that had happened before. When we saw enrollment declining, we made a directive that there would be more recruiters hired, and the University of Missouri at Columbia said that's just the system, that's not the campus. And part of the way the system, as in my opinion, has been used over 20 years is to actually reduce, not just you don't have the conflict with the president, but reduce the meaning and the understanding and the directions of the Board of Curators. You will notice that somehow it has come into our lexicon, and this is in our press releases, the University of Missouri System Board of Curators. Well, that is an interesting issue because the Constitution says the University of Missouri Board of Curators, which is on the front of Terry's AGB consulting report. So it's a many-faceted thing, Greg, but those are just examples where directives were not followed, even though they were direct.
Should we move on to the option C? And if Val would flip it over. Thank you. I'm going to move through this one fairly quickly because it's somewhat similar to D, but I'm happy to address any questions, comments, or disagreements that come along. This one removes the interim term preceding President Choi's title, and C is where you have the model that I described earlier is one man, two jobs. So it doesn't have much of the integration other than what you're already pursuing. I'll just mention a couple of the points under advantages that I think are important. And the second one is builds on the confidence in the current president. Everyone we talked to expressed confidence in the abilities, the vision, the approach of President Choi. You know, he's been there long enough, the honeymoon should be over, but he is still highly, highly respected. And so wherever people came down on one of these options or another, or particularly on combining the position, there was broad recognition that President Choi is somebody who could pull this off. Some question about whether ordinary human beings could do it, but you've got an extraordinary leader. The bullet there that refers to enjoy system-wide support with qualifications, I don't want to minimize the qualifications. And they're identified under the disadvantages. Certainly the first two are obviously enough. There's less of a push in this model for academic or administrative consolidations. But there is that question of number of people raised, is it too big a job for one executive? And I'll just mention, there's ways to structure things so that it doesn't all fall on the shoulders of the one executive. One example would be to have a provost at Mizzou or chief operating officer or someone with that kind of title handle the administrative stuff, while the president is one level up and more the external person. I don't, unless you have questions, I would just as soon move to D, which is in some ways a meatier option. But are there any questions on C or comments?
Hey, Terry.
Yeah.
This is Mike Williams. One of the questions we got when we were doing our listening is, as you talk about C and D, i.e. taking the tag off and kind of combining or not combining, how do you think that would affect the stature of the other colleges? And are there any concerns about whether that would then create too much control in Columbia with regard to the financial matters?
Thank you, Curator Williams, and I think we discussed that a little bit in one of our prior conversations. As in many of these, whether you see it as an advantage or a disadvantage depends on where you sit. Where you stand is where you sit, as you might imagine. I would think there's a school of thought that says a stronger Mizzou rising in the rankings and in other metrics is that's an advantage. That's a good thing. You know, we're putting more clout there, and that does then beg the question of, does that mean the other institutions become somehow less? And certainly that concern or fear is out there. When we go through the matrix of 8 institutions that are, combined, highly integrated, you'll see that they're some of the first-rate institutions in the country. So it works in some of the nation's best institutions. But there would be that concern, and it would require that the president or whoever it is has to, again, coming back to the political verve and adroitness, political small p in this case, how well they, as they make decisions and interact with the chancellors, send the message that we're all distinctive and important in our own way. But the phobia is there without question. Here, as in many other cases, it's the quality of leadership that makes the structure work, not the other way around.
Terry, if I could add, and Curator Williams, I think when Terry goes into option D, we really do address those perceived disadvantages of perceptions of other institutions more clearly. I guess they could have been here in option C as well, but I think they're more fully explained or listed at least under option D.
Curator Holbrook again. To alleviate those concerns, is it possible to have a structure where all the chancellors from each of the universities has more direct access to the Board of Curators?
Yes, I would say, but there's a downside to that I think you'd want to weigh carefully. to be blunt, tends to undercut the authority of the president. And if you want that person to carry things out, and whoever the chancellors are say, well, we'll go to a higher court to see if we can't get that overturned. In some systems that happens anyway without having a formal direct report. But that's a downside. And we call the model you've established moving away from the situation that Curator Steelman described, where the campuses could kind of blow off the system, to a stronger executive model. Having them report directly to the board undercuts that agenda.
At the same time, I recall from one of the interviews, one of the curators saying, if we do this combined structure in some way, it really is incumbent upon the board to ensure that it works, and that that all institutions, all universities of the system feel treated fairly. So, I agree with Terry, but I think that you want to ensure that the chancellors do have a voice with the board through the president. The board is a board for all 4 institutions, not just Mizzou, obviously, and that's been the case since 1963. So I think if you did combine the positions, the board's, the job description, obviously, for the president changes. It's different. And the evaluation you do of him and the expectations he has of you as a board and you have of him as a president changes. And that's an opportunity to say, how's it going? How's it working? Are we not only, is the job not only doable, but are the other campuses being treated fairly in your eyes? So I think it does put some I think, positive awarenesses on the Board of Curators if you do this combination.
I thank you very much. You made me think about a couple of things I had not thought of before, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And one more thing, as you go to D,
yes.
I want you to also address the issue about the autonomy of the campuses as you look at the slide in D. Meaning, does this combination, and I am throwing out some of the questions that, so everyone knows, I'm trying to intercede some of the questions that we picked up from just listening to the constituents. And one of the issues when you go to D is, how does that affect the autonomy of the chancellors in those campuses and the chancellor's ability to run that campus?
Great question. Yeah, it's the critical question, actually, of a bunch of this stuff. Can we go to D, Val? The next slide. Thank you. Let me tick off each one of these, and please comment, question, observe, whatever, as we go along. Obviously, it gets rid of the uncertainty that maybe that the interim implies, and that may keep the president, he could speak for himself, from going as far as he would like to in this regard. Builds on confidence in the president. It assumes you've got an extremely able leader like President Choi. Greater unity of command. I think it speaks for itself. Whatever structural conflicts there may be are reduced under this arrangement. Cost of duplicate executives, obvious enough. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the qualifications are important here, but there's so much trust in President Choi that people are, I think, willing to give this a shot if the curators decide it's the way they want to go. As Rich will explain a little later, this fairly common way of doing business. This isn't new on the face of the earth. If somebody says it's a catastrophe, well, if it's a catastrophe for brand name institutions, let's have it. And I think it more easily enables and supports a change agenda, much of which will be on the consolidation side. And frankly, back to Curator Steelman's point, if there becomes a board priority to reverse the decline in the rankings, this kind of structural model would help you to actually do that. Disadvantages not to be minimized. Curator Williams mentioned already the perception of unfairness from the other institutions. Sort of the parallel, the other side of that coin, view that this is really a Mizzou-centric institution, and St. Louis, Kansas City, Rolla have a second-tier status. May detract from academic excellence as a top goal. This is important for, I think, for particularly those that are new to the culture of the academy, where the leadership of the institution focuses on important, essential administrative, managerial stuff. Okay, just the time and attention tends to slide away from excellence, measured by rising in the rankings, whatever. There's a kind of Gresham's law here, where the more complicated the bureaucracy, the more attention it gravitates toward it. And the goal of becoming, say, in the top 25, to use Rich's example, kind of slides away because we've got these other, common course numbering or consolidations of human resources. So whatever they might be, they're important, but they're not about building a world-class great institution or sustaining its position. The other side of that coin is the next bullet, shifts attention to management and administration. Now, one of the individuals we spoke with raised a very interesting question. If you've got the president doing both jobs, both chancellor and president, what happens to the rest of the system if a big crisis that demands 24/7 attention from the president hits? Or what happens if there's a major crisis at another institution? Does the combined office have the resources, the time to focus on that? Is there any slack in the system that can be devoted to those inevitable but unexpected crises? And all of that is the disadvantages, I think, are summarized in that last bullet. Is this too big a job for one executive? Let me pause there and see if there are any questions, comments, observations, and particularly Curator Williams. Is this, to what extent is it responding to your question earlier, or should we pursue that a little further?
Well, I think you're answering it, and I think talk a little bit more about when you talked about either a provost or a chief administrative officer, how does that address or alleviate some of these concerns if you have that person on the Mizzou campus? Or does it exacerbate that issue of the president and having that chief administrative officer? In a moment, I'll let Rich to comment on that because he's looked at that model elsewhere. But I think it's a good idea. It addresses that last bullet in particular, and it probably enables, if you have an effective COO, enhanced provost, whatever title you want, enables the president to do his or her work more effectively because they're not dragged into some of those management administration issues I mentioned earlier. Let me just pause there, I guess. Rich, do you want to talk about institutions where that's the case?
Yeah, one that I've worked with and the research we were doing for that was LSU. We looked at the University of Hawaii system and at Indiana University. And those two places have, again, we can talk about it in the matrix, have a combined president and chancellor. But both IU and Hawaii really decided to strengthen the existing provost position at the main campus, IU Bloomington and University of Hawaii, Manoa. And they ensured, again, the president is the president of those institutions as well as all institutions of the system or of the university in the case of IU. So the president in that case is really the external person for the main university, and the provost has taken upon themselves far more internal, administrative, and academic responsibilities. And in some cases, fundraising for the university that doesn't conflict with other institutions. College athletics is a big issue, obviously, in schools like that. And the president is the face for college athletics, as well as the face to the legislature and all external bodies. In the case of a chief operating officer, Indiana University Board of Trustees considered that and even went so far to recommend it. But instead, it strengthened the provost and created a number of executive vice presidents in the president's office who have responsibilities for all 8 or 9 campuses of the IU system. So there was substantial consolidation. So instead of a COO, they've got, you know, those kinds of responsibilities spread among 6 or 7 executive vice presidents. But I would see a chief operating officer, you know, would be someone who worked in the president's office and not necessarily consolidated with responsibilities with the main campus. And a provost, if you strengthen that provost position, their responsibility would just be for the main campus, in this case, the Mizzou campus. And they would have no system-wide responsibilities unless they were, you know, included in if there's a council of chancellors, as I presume there is in Mizzou, maybe that provost could participate in those meetings as well with the other chancellors, so that there's some opportunities for collaboration and understanding of what's happening system-wide.
And one last question I want you guys to address in this, and then I promise to stop asking on these 2 slides. Do you lose the president as the face of the system when he's going to the legislature or to donors if he is also tied to the Columbia campus?
Good question, Michael. It is the only thing I can say, and again, in the universities and the systems that have this, is that understanding, transparency, communication is the best remedy or the best prescription for preventing those kinds of conflicts. Yes, there is, in LSU, for example, which really went from a system to an initiative in 2013 called One LSU. And they combined the president and the chancellor of the Baton Rouge campus into one individual. And that existed for 8 years. And is it working or not working? The supervisors, quite frankly, the Board of Supervisors is reevaluating that structure after 8 years to say, did that initiative really work? And is a combined position really an advantage? But again, your question about, you know, is there a confusion of the role between the main campus chancellor also being the head of the university? In times, yes, but the conflict or communication, transparency, and clarity, particularly with the legislative body and with donors, is essential to prevent any big conflicts from happening and really damaging the structure.
So this is Julia. I had a quick question, kind of drawing from the questions that we received from constituent groups. You mentioned the word conflict. Is there any inherent conflict of interest in having the combined roles? I'm a little bit, that's a subject that's come up, and I'm also a little bit, seems your disadvantages are sort of perception related. If you are to read that this is a fairly common administrative structure. So I guess this works in a lot of places and it's a matter of how you structure it, but could you also address the perception of there being a conflict of interest inherent in combining the 2 roles vis-a-vis the other campuses?
Terry, you want to take a shot at that first?
Sure. Curator Bernsick, it's a great question, and if I might say, a lawyerly question as well. No, with all due respect to everyone on the call, yeah, I think there would be, it'd be liable to the argument for somebody who had a decision go the other way, you know, that their chancellor's campus didn't get the a program approved that they wanted to launch, or a resource question. I think that would be one of the tensions that would have to be managed, not just with transparency, but with the president's understanding of and communication and relationship with the chancellor. But it's, yeah, I think it's a concern. As I mentioned with the Wisconsin example a little while ago, one could say that balance wasn't that well managed there, and that's why Madison wanted to break out. So it comes down to how adroit and respected the executive is.
Hey, Terry, I think Chancellor Agarwal has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Marcy Graham. I think you can tell, Rich and Terry, that because of the questions that have been asked about D, that there's interest in learning more about this particular structure. And you've mentioned at least 3 universities that have a structure that is perhaps not identical. And there may not be an identical structure out there, but that has enough similarities that some judgment can be made as to how that structure is working. And is there any anecdotal information about any of those systems that have a similar structure as to, first of all, how long it's been in existence? And if you went back to those universities today, 2020, what they would say about how it's working, and if they would tweak it, what tweaks they would consider making. It's kind of a long-winded question, but I'd like to have a little bit more of a flavor of information that would let us give some thought as to how a similar system to this, to D, is working.
Yeah, if we can go maybe to the matrix, that's in the report, I think on page 11 and the next couple of slides. But before we do that, it's a great question, and we have looked at. I can total 18 systems, only 4 systems, and about 14 what we call integrated universities, multi-campus universities that have this combined executive. There's also 2 or 3 that had that model and decided to become a system with a system executive with the chancellors reporting to that executive. They realized because of growth and complexity, I'm talking about Rutgers particularly, which had the president of the New Brunswick campus was also the president of the Rutgers Newark and Rutgers Camden. When Rutgers was given the university, there was a big scandal with the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. You might recall it. It was about 8 years ago. That was a freestanding university in 2 locations in Newark and New Brunswick. There was insider trading and all kinds of conflicts of interest in the board and in the administration. So it was done away with. The administration and the board were just dissolved by the legislature when Governor Christie was in office. And those 2 medical schools, those 2 health sciences schools were given to Rutgers. When that happened, Rutgers said, the president basically said, this system is grown and become really too complex for me to deal with both the New Brunswick campus and the medical schools. Now that was a change, it wasn't historical, that was a change and probably the right decision. Same thing happened at the University of Arkansas. It was really 9 campuses, and the Fayetteville campus president was also president of the system. It was just too diverse. Became too big of a job for one person. Too many campuses, 2-year campuses, 4-year campuses, the medical school. So they went to a system arrangement. And I go back to the LSU example because LSU is debating this. LSU has 9 campuses. Some of them are 2-year. Some of them are regional campuses, 2 separate health science centers. And they're debating, is that too big of a job for the president? And should we have, separate, again, the Chancellor of Baton Rouge from the President of the System Office? I think in the case, what I think, if there's one defining characteristic, I think, of these 4 systems and 14 universities, the universities in each case, the lead university is a major research university, just as Mizzou is. But the rest of the system is not large. It's not large in terms of numbers of students or number of universities, even though there may be a medical complex and a health and a university hospital. They're manageable. And I think the issue with LSU and Arkansas and Rutgers, the growth and the complexity just grew. It wasn't historical. It was added responsibilities and added institutions and added constituencies that made the single executive, the combined executive position, just more complex. So in schools like, a couple of the schools, the University of Montana, Montana State, these that have the main campuses in Missoula and in Bozeman have affiliated campuses, but they're just 3 or 4. So that it's again, a very manageable position.
Rich and Terry, as we go forward, one of the other things that struck me is we're trying to compare these institutions, which I think is what Marcy was saying, which I do think is valuable. And I might add parenthetically that I would like to have a deeper dive in with some of the personnel from some of these integrated universities. For instance, we do have access to the CFO at University of Minnesota because he was the CFO here prior to Ryan Rapp. But the way that these universities are funded varies widely. And I hate to always be the guy to bring up the money, but some of these governances decisions, I believe, and I'd like you to comment, work this in, go directly to the funding. For example, University of Minnesota has had a huge surplus. If you go to other states that have been able to support more than one great research institution like Texas, they have the severance funds. California, tremendous state support for their higher ed. Or there are other indications of that. Georgia, they have the Georgia Hope Scholarship, which allows them to have Georgia Tech and University of Georgia and other great universities. So I would like you to talk, and LSU has the flip side. LSU has had, even prior to COVID, and you've been there, so tell me if I'm right or wrong, tremendous shortfalls in funding over the last decade. And so all of that factors into it. So as you go forward, I would like for you and Terry to address how much of these system and governance changes are based upon the decisions as to what assets do we have and how many research institutions we can support. Now, one other thing I'd like to ask too, because you brought up, both you and Terry have brought up some good points on the political issues, which I believe are extensive. Were any political leaders interviewed in getting ready for this report?
No.
Okay. Do you agree that we, from your experience around the country, that before we make any final decisions, it is probably wise to interact with some of our political figures, because even though we have constitutional independence, they have the checkbook?
Yes.
May I ask a question, Curator Williams?
Yeah.
Real quick, this won't take long. So I'm in an integrated system. I know that here in Missouri, and I've been here for about 2 years, coming from Texas, from the UT system, where I was there for 27 years. Our 4 universities are the only research universities as designated by the state. Are the examples of integrated systems out there that have research universities integrated? Because you mentioned Houston, and I know Houston well. I mean, there is the flagship campus in Houston, but the other campuses are pretty much one step above community colleges. They're just teaching institutions. Even Texas A&M at College Station is the flagship, and the others are not really there as research institutions in Laredo or Corpus Christi. So are there examples of research universities that are integrated into a system as with the president and chancellor being the main executive officer? And maybe that's in some of the other slides, but I just wanted to put it out there as a question.
Yeah, I think you're right. Your perception and your insight is probably correct that most of these integrated systems or integrated universities evolved as the main campus, the flagship or the research university grew and developed other campuses that at later time became degree granting, maybe got separate accreditation, began to offer master's programs, but did not grow to the stature in terms of numbers, research dollars, historical relationships, and just institutional history, and quite frankly, Division I athletic programs that the original institution of that integrated system or integrated university has. The exception might be Indiana, with the odd campus IUPUI, the shared campus in Indianapolis, Indiana University, Purdue University of Indianapolis, which is both part of the IU and Purdue structures, which are both integrated universities. IUPUI is the medical center is there. It's a very strong, leading, innovative university. That is one case where an integrated university has more than one sort of leading research university. But you're correct that most of the integrated leadership positions are at places where there is clearly a main campus, and the other campuses sort of grew from that or evolved from that over time. The other exception might, before it became a system, I mentioned Rutgers. Certainly the New Brunswick campus was the lead campus of the three, but the Camden campus has the law school, and was getting quite a reputation in the state of New Jersey as a very good, very effective law school. So that didn't compete with New Brunswick, but it was in that integrated structure. There was clearly a campus that was well recognized in the state beyond just the New Brunswick campus.
This is Curator Hobrock. One of my biggest concerns, and then when we made Moon the interim, is the job too big? I know that I've heard, and you mentioned a CEO, a COO, or some sort of operational manager, and you alluded to it to be at the Mizzou campus side to relieve the responsibilities there. My question would be that if you were looking at D and wanted to make D a first step to E and bring all the administration under one system-wide, all the back office under one system-wide cloak, would it not be better to make that administrative officer part of the system? So you're set up for that move later, as opposed to making it part of the campus, and then bring all the other campuses under a campus. If you want to integrate them later, bring them under a system-wide blanket.
This is Terry, Curator Boulder. Yeah, I mean, if the game plan was we're going to do D first, and then see how it goes, but with the general intention to moving toward fuller integration, which is E, there'd be a lot to be said for that, for locating it in the system rather than the campus. The other side, obviously enough, is the Mizzou is a big, complicated institution, and needs oversight and management and so on. But it's not an unreasonable path to consider.
So if we did that, if you brought the backroom operation into the system, and you eventually integrated all the campuses, would that not possibly alleviate some of the concerns about being treated fairly, or the administration side of running the university from the standpoint of dollars and cents and technology and human resources and budgeting and all that is handled system-wide through an executive officer, obviously reporting to the president of the university, would that not help the issue of perception of being treated fairly?
Are you suggesting that the further consolidation on the, say, the administrative side to start with, would be governed by rules and regulations, you know, who makes the final call and salaries, for example, for star professors, and that it would reduce the sense of unfairness because the rules are out there and everybody's playing by the same rules?
Yes, I mean, they all are having access to the same central office, so to speak, to make their arguments on budgets. And the budget is ultimately coming to the Board of Curators to be approved. So it is in that aspect that we can maybe deal with this fairness issue. And again, I'm not, and then each campus, each chancellor at each campus would then handle their academia, handle their raises, handle their everything they want to do, just as they do today within the budgets that they have to work with.
You know, I worked for several years and consulted afterwards with the University of Wisconsin system, and it has been a highly regulated system and is becoming more so in response to COVID-19. And I believe it has had generally the effect that you're describing. People play by the rules, and they've reached a level of acceptance that they don't spend a lot of time you know, blaming the system for catering over much to Madison, for example. So I think it's an intriguing and in some ways a logical possibility.
Thank you.
Terry, do you want to go to maybe option E, which
D?
You know, sort of talks about some of this greater integration as the option.
Okay. Yes, but let me just turn back briefly to a comment that Curator Williams made, or a question he raised about campus autonomy and whether any of these more centralized options remove too much campus autonomy, or is that a sticking point? And yeah, they would. I mean, that's just the nature of leadership and authority. However, the question I would ask is, autonomy to what end? Would it relieve the campuses or the universities with enough autonomy to market and sustain themselves financially? Well, that would be a good thing. To improve quality and their stature and recognition for quality? Yeah, that's a good thing too. For improvements in student success, graduation rates, for example, jobs after graduation, do they have enough freedom of maneuverability to move the needle on those? Yeah, they should have enough freedom to do that. Greater autonomy to contribute more substantially to regional economic growth? Yeah, that would be a good thing. So just on a personal level, I don't support autonomy in itself as an end in itself, but rather if it's the freedom to maneuver to accomplish system-wide strategic goals, such as those I mentioned, then you want to provide that level of maneuverability, autonomy, freedom, whatever vocabulary you want. But you sure don't want to go in the other direction. Anyway, enough of that little editorial. D. The advantages are very similar to C, and I don't believe, unless you have particular questions, that I need to repeat those. Let me go to the disadvantages, because those would be the barriers to moving in that direction if that's what you wanted to do. Perception of unfairness, we've talked about a lot.
Hey,
there are
Terry,
a couple of ways to mitigate that, but it's certainly a tension that's going to have to be dealt with. Same with the Mizzou-centric system view.
Terry, are you on, excuse me, are you on D or E? We want to make sure.
D.
D, okay, good.
D as in dog. Okay. It's very similar to the prior one, except for substantial consolidations. And I won't assume that you're in favor of that, but I didn't hear anybody in our interviews who wasn't seeing the necessity of that in the current economic and forecasted economic environment. So it's you know, it's very similar, except that it D to C, except that it gives you more emphasis on using this new authority of the combined positions to achieve economies and other academic improvements through the centralization of authority.
Hey, Terry and Rich, I've got a quick question for you.
Yes.
Was you mentioned that the models may be more similar in universities with more of an integrated or smaller universities, and maybe the combined role of president and chancellor may not exist in structures with large research universities with multiple universities within the system. And I can't help but wonder how we define a research university. And is there a minimum amount of research dollars that one might need to have in order to qualify as a research university? Or do we slap these titles on, and does a university say, I'm a research university or I'm a teaching university? I mean, how do you measure what is large in that realm? Is it number of students, or is it number of research dollars? I mean, how do you say you're a large research university or you're not? I'm curious how can you quantitatively evaluate that?
Rich, are you up to speed on the latest Carnegie classification?
No, I'm not. Chairman Bernsick, there is the Carnegie classification of Research 1 and Research 2 institutions, and all the way down the line to, you know, a regional teaching institution. Those are very transparent rankings, or not rankings, but the classifications. I'd have to look up the access to them to see which institutions in the country fall in Research 1 and Research 2. But that generally is the accepted definition. Now, obviously, many institutions have aspirations to either become a comprehensive institution or Research 1 or Research 2 institution. And that aspiration is obviously expressed in the mission statement and the vision statement of the university. And if it's within a system, with the blessing of the system board and the system executive leadership. But there is we'd have to look up the research classifications by the Carnegie Foundation to see, you know, who that's sort of the accepted classification system that's accepted nationally.
My hunch is that Molly probably has that more or less at his fingertips. He's muted at the moment, but hi Molly, do you have the distinction between 1 and 2 in the Carnegie classification?
I don't have offhand. They have, just like US News and World Report, there's several factors that they look into. It's not just research dollars, it's number of PhDs you're producing, the terminal degrees of your faculty, the number of publications you have. Citations is a big piece of that, how much your publications be cited. I think Mizzou is the research intensive right now, the highest level within R1. I think I can speak for UMKC, it's a high research. So I think we are all in the R1 category, I think.
Thank you.
And also, you know, the other political piece of this.
Molly,
yes.
Only Mizzou is R1.
Okay.
The other 3 universities are 2. And they're ranked with about 107 universities that are part of R2, and there are 115 universities that are part of R1. Typically, you would need an annual expenditure of over $100 million to be in the R1. So none of the other 3 are R1s.
And there are 7 categories specifically. Molly just mentioned 4 of them. There are 7 categories. We are in R2, as President Choi mentioned. the threshold for 115 is $107 million as of last week. So you need to get to that level. But then there's R1, R2 research intensive, and then there is a PhD granting institution, which is the last category.
Thank you.
Additional questions on D before we go to E and F? Okay. Val, could you jump to E, please? Thank you. This model is the one that Curator Hobrock referred to a couple of minutes ago. And it's the central difference, I think, between D and E is that D is an integration of administrative services between Mizzou and the system. And this would include the other institutions in this sort of one integrated, unified administrative structure. If we can, we'll come a little later to what it could mean to extend that to the academic enterprise. But for the administrative backroom, you look in the appendix to the report, you'll see an illustration of the variety of administrative services and where they might be apportioned between the system and the campuses. The advantages is that it's an ambitious agenda, and with it would come, frankly, major changes, complicated enterprise, but it would, if it were successful, it would have more dramatic results, presumably, than the others. Some cost savings, I would say, as we were reminded of this in our conversation with system officers in particular, the speed with which the cost savings can be realized and the amount are often exaggerated in these situations, particularly during the transition period itself, right? Where you can't let go of the legacy processes until you're confident that the new ones will work. Disadvantages, that's probably the key one, is the first one. Should we bite off a smaller chunk to start with, get that right, and then consider down the road to going something more comprehensive such as this? One of the realities, frankly, of all these restructurings, whether it's this kind of restructuring or mergers or any others, it becomes the topic of conversation within the organization. Will I still have my job? Will I still have my these responsibilities? What kind of authority will I have? And inevitably, it puts a pause on the there's strong pressure, I should say, to put a pause on the agenda of getting stronger academically while these administrative changes are going on. Transitions costs are significant. And as I mentioned before, it's important to be realistic about the savings that can be achieved. So let me stop there. Rich, do you have anything to add to that one by any chance? You're muted, bud.
No, I don't. Terry, I think you've covered it well.
I have a question. When you're looking at the example of D versus E, you list may distract from academic excellence, but under E, you say it shifts attention from academic excellence. What do you perceive as that difference? And has there been an example where that was not true of someone utilizing E as an example?
Just repeat that again, if you would, Curator Winokur.
Sure. Sure. Under example D, you list may distract from academic excellence as a top goal. In example E, you say it shifts attention from academic excellence.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the difference and where there's an example out there using E as a model where that was not true?
Okay. Thank you. Great question. The reason it says shifts in the E is because there's even more focus on administrative change. This makes the system one integrated administrative unit as opposed to combining Mizzou and just the system. this brings the other 3 campuses into this unified administrative structure. And it just means there's more focus, or tends to be more focus on that, on the management change and the impact on individuals in it than on the academic excellence agenda. Albeit, as long as you focus on the administrative side, the faculty members who produce the research are less distracted, if you will. Okay, they get distracted if you decide to make one English department across the whole system. That becomes the major topic. An example where this has occurred is some 23 years ago, all the non-University of Minnesota campuses in Minnesota were combined into one very large system. Technical colleges, community colleges, and regional universities. Their own reports say that in that time, they do now have a common payroll, but they're still struggling with improving measures of student success, for example, graduation rates and so on. And part of that is because the cumbersomeness, the bureaucracy, the complications involved in trying to bring these, 26 or 7 schools together for the first time in a single system. So just anybody who studies complex organizations and organizational change would say that's the risk. Maybe surmountable with better leadership and more pressure, but that's the risk.
But I would think that if you created a system and took it step by step,
yeah,
one at a time, and you started off with bringing somebody in whose sole function was to combine the administrative backrooms and let the chancellors and the presidents of the universities continue pushing the academia, while the back room was being organized by somebody under the direction of the president of the university, but that's not the president's day-to-day responsibility to see that happen. You can maintain academic excellence, you can maintain research dollars, and on the backside, behind the scenes, you have a consolidation of administrative services.
That would seem to be the common sense approach.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
Any other questions about E? In that case, Valerie, if we could go to F.
Terry, this is Daryl. I have one small question. Can you go back to E real quick?
Sure.
What do you mean by transition costs are substantial? It seems like we'd be saving money. Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I can give you examples where that wasn't recognized. If you're implementing a new software system and you're agree to be the beta site, but you get rid of the old system prematurely and the beta site doesn't work, you're in trouble, or could be in trouble. Anybody familiar with the implementation of PeopleSoft, for example, a couple of years ago throughout higher education, realized that the costs of training and implementation were vastly underrated. So it's another one of those sort of common sense things where you want to make sure, particularly if it involves technology, that the new system is up and running and the bugs have been worked out and it's adequate before you say goodbye to the old. And then obviously during that transition period, before the new one is fully operational, you might have double costs.
Terry, I have a similar question, and it seems counterintuitive, and I can understand the reasons as to why the savings may not be what you would ordinarily expect. But as I understand it, some of this information comes from systems who were systems that had a much larger number of institutions than we do, and also community colleges as part of the systems. I would think where you have 4 campuses, that even though there may be significant transition cost, that with 4 campuses, it would be reasonable to expect long run significant savings. Has that not been the experience with where 4 or 5 institutions have integrated their systems?
It's a perfect question, Curator Graham. The reason I'm hesitating is there's often a lot of smoke and mirrors in these kinds of discussions of how much did we save or how little can we save, to be blunt. I would think I would say the factors in actually saving money are maybe 2 at least. One of them, if there's a real demand that we're not doing this just because it's more efficient, but because we don't have the resources to keep doing it the way we used to. That's a powerful imperative, and I think that might be the imperative Missouri is in. So there tends to be more force behind it. Secondly, 70% of your expenses, roughly, that's sort of the national average, are in personnel. People have to go away, you know, whether it's reductions in force or early retirements or incentives. And again, the willingness to recognize that and set up a program to make it as fair and humane as possible is the other factor, in my experience at least, as to how much you saved. And then the word significant. Most of your expenses are probably on the academic side. And if we're not talking about that, then you're limited.
Yeah, and all that makes sense. I did see that Ryan Rapp's picture came up on the screen. Ryan, but could you address that?
Well, I tend to agree with the last part of what Terry said. I think it's something that in Missouri has been, you know, really our financial resources probably over the last 20 years have driven us in that direction. I'm not saying there's not more opportunity there, but, you know, I think if you probably ask some of the chancellors that have came from other systems or other states, we are, at least from a back office function, I think more consolidated than what you see at many systems across the country. It's not to say that there's not additional cost savings we can't get after, but I think if that's our sole focus, it'll fall short of probably what we want to achieve.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Terry, this is Phil Snowden. I know that you had a conversation with an alum here in Kansas City by the name of Jim Pace, and he had sent me a structure which looked like what he was trying to do was to consolidate administrative services, but he was trying to put some of them on each campus so that each one felt like they had some autonomy and some control. I don't know where that fits into D and E, and could you just comment briefly on what his proposal was and how it might fit into this, or if it fits in at all?
Curator Snowden, I had a very enjoyable and interesting conversation, and I read the commentary from Jim that you passed on to me. If I recall correctly, his recommendation was that there would be councils to conduct some of the combined, conduct and oversee some of the combined administrative consolidations that we've been talking about here. And if one interprets that as kind of a customer advisory council to you know, add an element of realism and the viewpoints of those that actually have to live with the consequences, I think it's a positive thing. It seemed to me it was more about the manner in which the transition is managed and implemented than a profound structural difference in the way it's done.
Very good.
Shall we go to F and then maybe step back for any broader questions about the different models before going to a couple of takeaway thoughts for you. F is very similar to E, And I would say that the big change from my point of view is the change in the title. Do we have that on the advantages? This makes the, oh yeah, it's in the title. This exists, it exists, for example, at the University of Illinois, just to name a system that has a, the main campus, which is, one of the top ranked public universities in the country. It's also got an excellent urban campus in the Chicago area. And there's some rivalry, as you would imagine, between the two, but it seems to be currently pretty well managed. And they also have a smaller regional campus in the state capital. But there, the campus heads all have the title of vice president. And it has it contributed any more to the centrality? I would say probably not, just my read of it. And the last point under the disadvantages and changing the title is you've already got a strong executive model in the CRRs that you changed in 2018 to emphasize the reporting relationship between the chancellors and the president. So I don't know that you'd need to go to this extra step, or certainly need to do it right away. And if it would make any difference other than symbolically. The other disadvantage is something that I mentioned earlier, and it's included later in the report if you're interested in pursuing it, and that is if you convert the campus heads to something like branch managers, then you lose some level of the entrepreneurial spirit and agenda, growth in quality, growth in size, whatever. And that to me is not a recipe for what you want to achieve. So if there are no, I'm happy to entertain questions on that one or any of the others. What if we, let me ask Val if we could go back to, I think it was the third slide that lists the 6. Bingo. Just as you look over that, any other observations, questions, concerns, criticism come to mind?
None of the models. Did I just disconnect? None of the models talk about combining academia. Right. Is that something that we should just completely ignore?
No, thank you, Broderick. I tell you what, let me suggest this. Let Rich walk through the 8 examples, the concrete examples. He's referred to a lot of them already, so we probably don't need to spend as much time as we would otherwise on those. And then I'd like to come back to your question if I could, as kind of maybe the second to last or something big item to discuss. It's a great question, and that's where the money is in many respects. So we won't forget it, but if we could, Rich, and to the extent that Rich can comment on that as he goes through the models, great. But otherwise, we'll deal with it separately if that's okay.
That's fine.
So Val, I don't know what slide it is. It's a slide after F. It might be slide 10 or 11 or something like that. Yeah, and I'll be very brief because we have touched on the integrated systems and the next slide as well, the integrated universities. There are just 4 of systems that define themselves as university systems. And again, there's a fine line sometimes between what's called an integrated university and what's called an integrated system. But these 4 systems, University of South Carolina system, University of Hawaii system, University of Houston system, and University of Minnesota system have a combined chief executive with the system and the main campus of the system. It's historical in South Carolina and the University of Minnesota It has been on and off at the University of Hawaii system and the University of Houston system. Hawaii just recently, a year ago, it created the permanent combined position. It had been the interim position for the president of University of Hawaii system and the chancellor of the Manoa campus, but they made it permanent a year ago.
Rich, can I ask one question so I understand? On these systems, do each of the different universities within the system have different accrediting agencies, or in any of these systems, are they all accredited by one?
I believe that each of these four, there were separate accreditations for the institution as well as for the programs that they offer. If we go to the next slide, where, here's examples of 4 integrated universities. Now, really, I add up 14 integrated universities around the country. In addition to these is Ohio. A lot of them are in the Big Ten or the Pac-10, Washington State, Ohio State, University of New Mexico State. What are the others? We have Purdue, Indiana, University of Pittsburgh, Arizona State, and a few others. And many of these do have a single accreditation. Penn State has 23 or 24 campuses now. Many of them are just regional 2- and 4-year degree programs, some of them graduate programs, but obviously the main campus in State College is the Big Bear and always has been. But there's a single accreditation for all 24 campuses. And the administrative structure in the president's office in State College, there is a vice president for regional campuses. There's an academic vice president for the regional campuses, so that there is this sense of integration. If you get on the website of Penn State, every one of those 23 campuses, the websites look the same. They all call themselves Nittany Lions. The colors of whatever blue and white are predominant. University of Michigan does have separate accreditation for its 3 campuses. Obviously, the Big Bear is Ann Arbor. I grew up in Michigan. The University Hospital of Michigan, the hospital system, is the biggest employer in the state. And you can imagine, growing up with General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, and you learn that now in the 21st century, it's the University of Michigan Hospital, which is the biggest employer. But the accreditation is separate for the University of Michigan Flint, University of Michigan Dearborn. But again, the president of Ann Arbor is the president of all 3 campuses. We talked about Indiana, maybe not any reason to talk about them a little bit more. They have a very extensive, as we learned from your e-learning director who was at IU, very extensive online learning, consolidation of online programs, single degree offerings online at Indiana University. It really is again, doesn't call itself a system, it used to, but it rather just wants to call itself Indiana University, an integrated research university with other campuses throughout northeastern Indiana. University of Washington, again, one of the premier public research universities in the country, perhaps ranks first or second, I think, in the amount of federal research dollars it gets. It's either them or Michigan that ranks 1 or 2. Again, it has campuses in the Seattle area. I believe there's a single accreditation for all of those campuses with the UW Seattle campus. And again, a lot of the administrative duties for the branch campuses are handled by the president's office in Seattle. I should have said this at the beginning before I went through these, what's an integrated system, what's an integrated university. I got the clear impression from the interviews, reinforced by the conversation today, that even though it is commonly called the University of Missouri, and as Curator Steelman pointed out, constitutionally it is the University of Missouri, all recognize the importance of the University of Missouri brand. Most of you, the vast majority of you, prefer to define yourself as a system rather than a university. And be it an integrated system, which is the decision to be made, you prefer that definition rather than university. And I think that absolutely is correct. Now, assuming that the budget crises and the continued decline are abated somewhat in the near future, there's no reason that that definition or that classification category, whatever you want to say it is, as a university system, there's no reason that should not continue. But these integrated universities have some lessons to be looked at, some lessons to be learned in terms of academic integration as well as administrative integration, as do the four systems. It's interesting, again, I mentioned that there were some integrated universities that grew with complexity. It was one, I mentioned Rutgers, I mentioned Arkansas, and I mentioned with the debates that are going on at LSU. One I also neglected to mention was Washington State University, which is an integrated flagship. Again, because of the growth at Washington State, the addition of a medical campus in Spokane. Washington State's located in Pullman, several miles from Spokane, but the creation of that medical school, which was a testament to the activity and advocacy of the former president, who sadly passed away soon after the medical school was created, Elson Floyd. In fact, the medical school is in his name. Its creation is leading Washington State to say, we have this integrated position, population growth, enrollment growth in the medical school. Maybe we ought to think about creating a system. COVID-19 and state budget cuts may mitigate against that. But I go back to the idea that a lot of growth and a lot of complexity has led some integrated universities to think that they ought to separate the flagship institution or the main campus institution from the system office president. I don't think that's true of, I don't want to go into some other reasons why I think a combined position in Missouri could work, but if there's any questions at this point, I can talk a little bit about academic consolidation. Maybe we should hold that for just a second to see if there's any questions on these integrated systems or integrated universities. If not, Terry, do you want me to talk just for a second about what academic consolidation?
That'd be great, Rich. Whoops, was there a question there? Okay, if you look at the report on page 12, you'll see the upper half of the page, a series of bullets that give an illustration of it, and Rich might want to, go through it with that in mind.
Yeah, I think for any system or group of institutions, however they're defined, this is the most difficult area to make change. It doesn't mean it's not possible. It's happening in the online programs very rapidly, but in terms of the traditional academic offerings with faculty, it's institutions tilling this field are certainly breaking new ground. But what could academic consolidation sort of look like? We mentioned the single accreditation could exist, particularly not so much for a system, but for integrated universities. But it has been proposed in two systems, University of Maine system, the University of Alaska system. We didn't propose it at LSU. We said, we checked with SACS, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, and said that if LSU wanted to create a single institutional accreditation, not again for its programmatic accreditation like for medicine and engineering and what have you, that it was possible, but LSU chose not to pursue that. So, but it is possible within a university system. As are single programmatic accreditations across campuses and units, not all, but some that may be desired to the extent of program unity, particularly at the upper division. So single programmatic accreditations could be possible. Another academic consolidation is a common undergraduate curriculum. I know that Missouri has Core 40. I don't know how that figures into this, but a common undergraduate curriculum among all campuses of the system, common course numbering, is a possibility, and certainly is actually, I think is desired. It facilitates any transfer of students that in any course that they take within the system is fully transferable and articulates with any other course or class or degree program at any other campus of the system. A lot of states have dealt with this statewide, but I don't know what the situation in Missouri is, but if you don't have common course numbering and ease of transfer, I think it's a big barrier to students. A single application process that is a single application for all students applying to any campus of the system, and sometimes with ranked preferences if they don't get their first choice institution. Each institution, of course, has separate admission requirements, and students don't need to reapply if they transfer among institutions. Student transfer is very seamless. I point to Penn State again, where my son went. As part of the application process, you list, as most students do, they want to go to the state college campus, but they are asked to list the second and third choices if they don't get into the main campus. Online education are centralized through the office of the system, and online opportunities that use lead faculty from top departments and top programs maybe are integrated so that all university system or campuses encourage the top talent, I guess, to be the provider of the online programs. There's a real effort for efficiency, quality, and reduced cost to students. And programs, if they become successful, are obviously marketed to other states just as other accredited institutions accredited in their states or licensed in their states can offer programs in Missouri. You as well can offer programs through online programs through reciprocity with the other states that Missouri, I think all 50 states have signed on to this organization called SARA, the State Authorization for Reciprocity Agreement. Joint teaching and joint research activities, I think, are very emblematic of an integrated, consolidated academic program where there's interinstitutional collaborations and cross-disciplinary courses and programs that are encouraged, as well as collaborative research proposals to federal agencies. I was reading about the Next Gen Health Research Initiative and Health Program Initiative, and I think that is really an opportunity for the University of Missouri and all of its campuses and stakeholders to work together on collaborative projects and collaborative research projects, collaborative research opportunities and teaching opportunities for students. And that is, I think, a real example of where you can consolidate some activities and collaborate on some activities that offer opportunities for continued and greater collaboration among all 4 campuses. I think it's maybe not listed on page 12 of the report, but I think a centralized research and education fund that's in the system office, maybe run by obviously administered by the president, but maybe the board having some input in what the priorities could be. That encourage collaboration among faculty, among all the campuses, that encourage entrepreneurial and innovative projects, be they in research or teaching. And again, being redundant here, but really emphasize sort of the collaboration and integration of faculty among academic departments who can work together on either online teaching or collaborative research. You could even have a unified system of promotion and tenure that at least allows for campus differences. But there might be some cross-campus teams that could work together under the direction of the system academic vice president or something. Guidelines might be uniform for all campuses. We're recognizing that teaching is weighted more at some institutions than others. Tenure and promotion policies could include guidelines, again, being redundant, but include guidelines for collaboration in teaching and research as an incentive to get faculty to do that. And this would really be going far. Terry mentioned it a little bit, and it would really break new ground. is consolidation of academic colleges within system campuses, such that you had one dean for all 4 institutions, not for all academic programs, all departments, but for some, such that the departments report to that dean at the whatever campus houses the dean. Obviously, electronic communication would make that more possible, but that's really a sort of a stretch goal in terms of academic consolidation. I just know of one institution that actually was in the University of South Carolina system who did something very similar. It was a small 4-year institution of only 2,500 students, the University of South Carolina at Aiken, several miles from the main campus in Columbia. But the chancellor of the campus decided, he said, you know, if we have like 8 deans, we have 2,500 students, do I really need this? And so what they created with the approval of the deans was just a council of department chairs, and sort of made them the academic administrative unit that advised the president on the academic programs and academic direction and strategic direction of the institution. Anyway, that's sort of a rough and sort of combobulated presentation on what academic consolidation could mean. But there's certainly very many, several components of those examples I gave that could be pursued carefully with all of the constituents of the campus, particularly the faculty and the chancellors and other academic administrators.
Rich, that was a great presentation. Can I ask, even in the integrated systems, not the integrated universities, but even in the integrated systems, are all of the different campuses or universities or whatever you want to call them, are they all treated the same vis-a-vis their relationship with the central university? Or are there some systems that have varied command and control, administrative consolidation, et cetera, recognizing that some places have different needs than others?
I think in process, you know, I'll defer to Terry a little bit because there's 2 systems he's very familiar with that are really dealing with this, again, because of budget cuts. University of Maine system, which I think we reference in the report, which really was trying for a single accreditation, really trying to dramatically integrate their academic programs. University of Wisconsin, which we just learned about a couple of weeks ago, where the board and the central administration is talking about some dramatic administrative and academic consolidations. Again, trying to get ahead of the curve of the perceived and actual budget crisis because of COVID-19 and the shutdown of the economy. And I think you're gonna, biggest thing about DC on university websites is, are we going to be open in the fall, and how we're going to try to have some combination of hybrid courses and online courses, maybe starting earlier and getting students together, keeping them safe, and maybe sending them home at Thanksgiving and ending the semester early. But I think what's hidden in those messages, and what's the next wave of messages that you're going to hear about, read about, are how are we going to consolidate? How are we going to consolidate administratively and academically? Because we have to, because we just don't have the resources anymore to continue in the present as we have in the past. But Terry, do you want to say a little bit more about Maine and Wisconsin to answer Curator Steele's question?
Quickly, let me mention the differences between Maine and Missouri that you know, would inform your thinking. In Maine, much smaller system. 2 campuses represent 3/4 of the enrollment, and the other ones are by Missouri standards pretty small. So, and B, the demographic plunge is much greater in Maine and in Alaska, which we'll come to in a minute, than it is in Missouri. And they have a very congenial relationship with the accreditation people who are interested in having one system-wide accreditation. So it makes it a much more feasible project and a more sensible project than it might in a more complicated state. Alaska, there in a sense the politics of the system intervened and prevented the much discussion of one accreditation, one single kind of university. They still have, Alaska's financial problems are exacerbated by the plunge in the production of oil and the price of oil. So they've kind of kicked the can, frankly, in my view. Maine is proceeding, but neither one of them are, I think, close enough to Missouri in structure to pursue the single accreditation anytime soon. Having said that, that list that on page 12, which is only a partial list that Rich went through, it seems to me the exigencies of the state's economy, COVID-19, are going to force you to take a hard look at those, even though they're much trickier and will probably incur greater opposition than the administrative consolidation.
One last word, and this is actually, I'm jumping ahead a couple of pages. I think this system that has done the most in terms of administrative and academic consolidation is the University System of Georgia. And they have accomplished, and I applaud the two system chancellors and the Board of Regents for doing this. I think they have combined 9 institutions into 5. They've done mergers, consolidations and mergers, and saved a lot of money. They can document how much money they saved. They didn't have to lay off anybody to do this. They let attrition, I believe, just take care of any duplicative costs. But the academic integration that took place is quite remarkable. Terry and I were on a webinar with one of the vice chancellors who led that effort, and it's continuing. I think you're going to see more mergers in Georgia. I think you're going to see more mergers in states, particularly in the Northeast, I won't name them, that are in systems where enrollment is dropping, population is dropping, resources are dropping dramatically. And they don't have to close these campuses. They could make them affiliates of other campuses. But I think you're going to see that in some of the large systems that in states that have a lot of educational choices for the student population.
One additional comment on Georgia. They had about 5 goals for the consolidation, similar, frankly, to the goals that were laid out and that you gave us in this report. It could be summarized under higher functionality administratively and on the academic side, and cost reduction. And they can point to measurable results in all of them. But it wasn't just about the money for them. It was important, but not just about the money. It was greater educational effectiveness, and the metrics seem to suggest they achieved that and are achieving it.
Terry, can I ask you a particular question on the Georgia system? And would it be possible, do you think, to set up some sort of interviews where we could talk to Georgia? Because Georgia's always been interesting to me. And I think that with this consolidation, they actually, in the state of Georgia, have 3, at least 3. They may have more.
Yeah.
R1 research institutions. I know Georgia State, Georgia, and Georgia Tech all are. So it's really, they've really accomplished what I would like to see us be able to accomplish. And we may not be able to, but I'd like to know a little more about how they did it.
They're happy to talk about it too. They've got a good story to tell, and they've thought about it a lot. So that's one recommendation I would make. Let's see, Chair Bernsick, would you like us to go to kind of a summary takeaway slide at this point, or is there something else we should pursue at the moment?
I think that would be fine. And I also want to make sure that we give people who may have dialed in outside of the board opportunities to ask questions. And I also recognize we've been going for 2.5 hours. So I'll kind of defer to you two. Do you think, do you want to get to the takeaways, take a break, come back, open the floor to questions? Would you rather take a break now, come back and do the summary? What would be your preference?
How about if we do the takeaways and then take our break and then come back and take questions, gives us a little chance to reflect also on what some of the issues are.
Great, let's do that.
Thank you. In that case, Val, would you go to the next slide, please? No, one more. Here we go. This isn't quite all the takeaways, but the themes on this slide have come up in the conversation, fortunately. So let me just tick through them quickly. The political realities, Curator Steelman's question earlier, where these things fall down is one of the ways they can fall down is where there's not a reasonable level of alignment between the political interests and the state political leadership and the changes that are envisioned. It doesn't make it a smooth path, but in other states there where the board thought it had the authority to make dramatic changes in the system without really consulting the ultimate authority, which is the governor and the folks in the legislature. Usually it didn't end well. As you think about which, if any, of these models you wish to pursue or examine further, there is a balance to be found between the complexity of the change and the product. McKinsey has those nice windows, where they balance off a probability of being able to pull off the change against the expected benefits from it. So that might be a way to think about how ambitious you want to be at the start. Cost of transitions, we've talked about. Lessons from Georgia. Yeah, and maybe not stopping at Georgia, but setting up a couple of conversations with other exemplary systems that have gone through this would be a good kind of workshop opportunity for curators. And then this final comment, and I'm just reinforcing what you already know. This is not rocket science. You've got an extremely able leader. If you have the right structure so that he can exercise leadership and bring about frankly, what will often be difficult changes, then you want to combine his skill and energy and insight with a structure that will enable him to do the job as rapidly as possible. There is that old line about good leadership or able leadership can make any structure work. Yeah, that's true. But why not have the structure that most supports able leadership, particularly when this isn't just a matter of conversation. These things have to happen, or some version of these things have to happen. So that would be whatever wisdom we have on the implementation side, that would come close to being it. Break?
Break. All right. How much time, Cindy, do we want to give folks for a break?
Let's see, it's 10:30. I think I would do 5 minutes.
Let's give folks at least 10 minutes.
10? Okay.
Yeah. She runs a tight ship. Yeah. All right. Let's plan on coming back here at say 10:40, 10:41.
Thank you.
Ish.
All right.
Thanks. All right. It's 10:41. Hopefully folks had a chance to get a little bit of a break here and have come back ready for questions. Cindy, how does this work? How are we able to take questions as someone?
Well, the only way, Chair Burnsick, it'll just be the university leaders who will be able to ask questions. And most of them are in this webinar as a panelist, which means that they can speak. any other input we'll have to do, as we were talking about, through a website.
So the website is up to take questions or no?
It will be early next week.
Okay. Do you want to describe that a little bit?
Sure. As Chair Burnsick mentioned, we would like to hear from various constituencies and other members of the public as far as pros and cons or input and thoughts as to the discussion today. So we will be making available a web page next week where there will be a site where you can provide input.
Okay, so for now, we will open the questions up to any of the university leaders who can ask a question through Zoom.
Chair Burnsick, this is Rick Barron. I'd like to ask one.
Floor is yours.
So that was a great discussion, Rich and Terry. You didn't mention how any of these consolidations could affect AAU status as we increase the number of faculty who may or may not be productive. Any thoughts on that? How did Indiana and others deal with that?
Richard, this is Terry. Frankly, I don't think I can answer that on the spot, just to be direct. So I won't terrorize on it until we either run it down or link you up with a colleague who who's experienced that directly. Rich?
My impression is it would not affect it at all because, we're not talking about, well, unless the board decides they want to create one integrated University of Missouri with all 4 campuses administratively integrated, such as University of Michigan or Indiana has done. But my feeling is that, AAU status is judged upon, as several factors, the quality of the faculty, research, productivity being foremost, and national ranking. So I really don't see it changing. If a structure is integrated such that the autonomy of Mizzou is sustained and the autonomy of the 3 other institutions is sustained.
What other questions are out there? I know you have them.
The academic consolidation that you spoke of, that can occur with any of the 6 models that you described. Or I'm asking, that's a question for Terry and Rich.
Good to see you, President Choi. Yeah, I think so, but the question is, which would facilitate that kind of thing more readily than another? The current structure as pre-existing, as Rich more accurately put it, I think makes it tougher. But if the decision is to make as permanent as anything is in this world, the 2 positions, I think it facilitates that kind of change.
All right, I know people are thinking about what questions they want to ask, so while we give them time to do that, I'll go ahead and ask you a rather loaded question. I know you were not asked to make any recommendations regarding which structure would be appropriate for our needs, but you have worked with us a lot and also on multiple occasions now, and I think you do know the people, and I'm sure you have formed an opinion. So if you have formed an opinion, I would like your opinion as to what model you think could work for our state and our situation.
Thank you, Chair Burnsick. From my point of view, option D, with the possibility of going further down the road as Curator Hubrock suggested, is the right balance between a complicated change and the promise of significant results. The ones further down the list are pretty ambitious, and I know Rich has, and I have seen on several occasions where the board's reach exceeded its grasp and didn't achieve what it wanted to. The first one or two just don't seem to speak to the time. So D represents to me that right balance between complexity and actually getting some things done that are important to the board and the system.
Rich, anything? Just as you took a bite, right?
Yeah, French bread. No, I think I agree with Terry. I think as I think one of the disadvantages stated in E is, would it be too much too soon if you tried to do all the things in option E? And option D is a step in that direction, but it takes it in more measured ways. I think, despite, the fact that there's 2 medical schools, as we found from President Choi, all 4 institutions as Research 1 or Research 2 institutions, and, a large budget, university hospital, other health-related programs, that it's a doable option, combining the administrative positions and then other, the chancellor and the president and other administrative positions at Mizzou. For the simple fact you're co-located, in Columbia, helps with that. And all of these consolidations or integrations that we talked about, the president of the system or the main campus was co-located with the main institution. So I think it's doable. I think, again, it changes the job description for President Choi. That needs to be rewritten, as does the evaluation process of him. And I think that's an opportunity for a real enhanced conversation between you as board chair, the entire board, and the president, and subsequently the chancellors as well, the other 3 chancellors, on where the system is going, what its goals are, what its strategic agenda should be going forward, not just a strategic plan, but how are you going to think strategically about positioning all of the universities of the system to, again, serve the needs of the primary constituents, who are the students and the citizens of Missouri. So I think D does that and answers what's going to be the constant pressure that you're going to face of the economic consequences of the downturn and the shutting down of the economy. It's going to be with us in all systems for a long time. So how we can get ahead of the game by consolidating costs and structures administratively and academically is critical.
I've got a question here for Terry and Rich. Do you think this is the best model for our system, which is not uniform like some of the other systems? You may have already addressed this, please forgive me. Is this decision based on Moon's capability, which I think is great, and I agree with you, or is this a decision based on our unique circumstances? Because what we don't want is to make a decision based on Moon's ability to do it, because we're making this decision for future presidents as well. So that's my question. And we've got a unique system here. We've got people that disagree on, they don't even want us to use the word flagship. Okay. I think it's a flagship model. Others disagree, and I think others disagree with what that means for them. So is this the correct model for us? Not just specifically based on Moon's ability to do it.
Curator Chapman, let me take a shot at that, and then I'm sure Rich will be interested. And it also begs the question of, let's say you did make the combination of the 2 positions, as not something you decided to do, but you might decide to do. Should you sunset it and say 5 years, or at some future location, some future time when the president should leave? And my recommendation, frankly, not sunsetting it, because the curators can decide to change this a year after they implement it if they want to. And if you were to have or 5 years or 10 years, just like your peers down in Louisiana are reconsidering the way they structured the system. My concern with the sunset thing is that it opens the door to those that are opposed to the change to say, well, we just have to wait these guys out. We'll get another opportunity to undo this down the road, when you don't need a sunset provision, because the board can choose to change its mind if it has compelling reasons to do so. So you know, in these times, playing with the very skilled team you have, presumably for the next several years, in my view, is the way to go, because you have the good fortune to have someone as talented as President Choi. But it doesn't foreclose the board changing its mind down the road if circumstances should change.
This is Marcy Graham, and I know that we have university leaders from all 4 campuses on this call. I also know there's some awkwardness in asking questions, but I think this is a great opportunity, an opportunity that may not come around again. And if university leaders including chancellors from some of the other campuses have questions about the discussions we've had, I think this would be a great time for us as curators to hear those questions. And so I would encourage the use of this opportunity, which is a very important time for us as a board.
Curator Graham.
Thank you.
Let me take your offer, and let me ask a couple of questions of the consultants, because I don't know when we'll have a chance to do that again. These are questions I'm getting on my campus, so I thought I might as well ask. Number one, in terms of academic consolidation, one question that I get is, if we do more of that just by the sheer size of Mizzou, wouldn't it ultimately, in reality, just become what Mizzou wants in terms of programs? That's one question. And question number 2, perhaps more provocative, is this a problem in Columbia that we're trying to fix, which is the tension between the president and the chancellor? And it's more of a Columbia problem that we're trying to fix. So those are 2 questions I'm getting on a regular basis. It would be great if we could get some answers for those.
Molly, those are great questions, and we have people here, but this is what I would encourage. I think we need to hear some provocative questions that touch on these important issues. So thank you. And I hope we hear more.
Yeah, and just to add to what Marcy's saying, I think all of the campuses are probably getting questions, and we want to hear the tough questions, because that's what we brought this team in to answer. We don't have the answers. They may or may not have the answers, but they've at least seen enough other scenarios that they can tell you what has worked and what hasn't worked. So please bring the questions, and the harder the better.
Great point, Madam Chairman. And I will say this, Marcy and I met with the faculty from all campuses. And when I said the word flagship, I mean, the comment section in Zoom went off. I mean, people got pretty animated about it. So please speak up, because there's different points of view on that. And I just like to get those concerns aired and discussed, instead of talking about them in the background, or, maybe undermining, this whole thing once we make a decision. So let's talk about it.
And as a point of order, in that conversation with the faculty council, Daryl and I took opposite positions on the discussion about flagship, but it was a high-level discussion, and it was a good discussion.
So this is Modigani.
Hang on 1 second. Just 1 second, and I'm so sorry, but I want to make sure Molly's questions get answered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Chancellor Agrawal, I think the academic program question that you asked I think this administrative structure will fail if academic program decisions, be they for elimination or adding programs or online programs, if it's too Mizzou-centric, too Columbia-centric, if for some reason the central administration is deferring to Columbia to the disadvantage of the other three institutions, then the structure will not work. Whether or not this is just an issue between the president's office and Columbia to ease tensions between what was maybe former chancellors and former presidents, I don't know the answer to that. But if it is, there's no reason that alleviating that tension has to interfere with, again, an effective structure that can serve all campuses, all institutions of the system. So if it's sure, it's going to help alleviate any tensions between Columbia and the president's offices that may exist or are perceived to exist. But nonetheless, I feel, and I think Terry does the same way, that is, and maybe this isn't the right term, but that's a collateral benefit of this integration that will take place.
My only addition to that would be the second half of Molly's question. Is this a Columbia-system problem or a chancellor-president problem? And I don't think it's, personally, I don't believe that it's driven by the personalities of the two individuals, one of whom has, of course, gone on to Central Florida, as it is the structure. It's inevitable that there's going to be some abrasion that needs to be thoughtfully managed. That's how every system where you've got a kind of main significant major institution. It also occurs where you've got small institutions who have the Speaker of the House in their same district, or large urban institutions. And take the example of University of Illinois, Chicago. So I don't believe it's driven by personalities. I think it's driven by structure, and it's likely to be improved if the two positions are combined.
I ask a follow-up question as a curator. How, as a curator, do I, if we made a change, if we did this, as a curator, how would I prevent the president or the whole system to become too Mizzou-centered? What should I look for? What should I do to prevent that from happening?
Let me offer a couple of thoughts and of what happens in other systems, and then I ask my colleague to step in as well. Part of it is symbolic, reports from the chancellors at board meetings. Part of it is, are they, and I know our board meeting in Missouri, but they were all centered on a particular topic. So this, are they positioned to appear to be marginalized, just in the way they're placed in discussions? Another suggestion is to have if this doesn't already exist, a curator or two who become specialists in those campuses, get to know them well, get to know their concerns and their potential, and share that with the board. Doesn't mean they become sole advocates, but they become very well informed about the needs and agenda of that campus. And I would say, particularly between the chair and the president, there may be a larger group as well, regular, frank conversation about the, I'll call it the internal politics or hot topics within the system, so that the president, whoever it is, has a kind of check and a input from someone who's got the state as a whole, and the politics of the state, small p and big P, to leaven their thinking. So it has a lot to do with the communication and the process, the relationship and respect, as opposed to regulation. Or one suggestion was to set up a council of chancellors that was kind of parallel and almost equal to the president, I think a council that gives advice and input and, yeasty dialogue and where they can disagree and challenge and all of that is really important. But I think to fracture the unity of command by having two power centers is not such a good idea.
Terry, what I heard you say, I want to make sure I'm right, because this is a great importance to me, is that the board can play a significant role in preventing the discord that can occur from change by being more active, more involved, and more engaged with some of the different constituencies. Would you agree or disagree? That doesn't mean we micromanage, but that they know we're there and they know we're fair and balanced.
That's the gospel that we preach now, is the more highly engaged board with the big but that you mentioned, Curator Steelman, avoiding micromanagement. And frankly, athletics is often one of the key hotspots in that relationship. But these days, governance is a team effort, and a board sitting on the sidelines and not being engaged with the full complexity of leadership at this time is not as helpful as one that's advising, challenging, supporting, informing, learning from, but also teaching the chief executive.
I would add two things about, ensuring that this consolidation wouldn't make it too Mizzou-centric. I think it's really incumbent upon President Choi, and I'm sure he does this now as assistant president, to have a presence at all four institutions, the other three institutions in particular, on a regular basis.
Yeah.
To meet with faculty, to meet with students, to meet with community leaders, to say, I am still the president of this system as well as Mizzou, but I care about you, I care about your programs, I want to hear your concerns, I want to hear what's going on, I want to hear your successes and your challenges. Likewise, I presume the board meets around the four institutions in your regular meetings. Hopefully it does, in Rolla, in Kansas City, and St. Louis, as well as Columbia. Rotating your meetings to campuses is a big part of ensuring that all campuses feel that they're part of the system, that they're cared about, that the board cares about them. There's certain time in board meetings when you're on campuses that have time for public comment, not just presentations by the chancellors, but presentations by key faculty, by key students, and even community leaders. So I think those two events, which are not symbolic, I mean, they are really substantive and strategic, can ensure that this consolidation would work and not be perceived as too Mizzou-centric.
Thank you for that. And I want to go to Mo now, because I know he had a question, and I think I heard Kristen jumping in as well.
So thank you for the opportunity. I like to ask first of all, I'd like to say thank you for all the effort. I don't know, frankly, whether the solution is integration of the two positions or remaining, separate. But I think we are sort of asking the impossible. When the offices of this system as a whole and one major campus that is referred to as the flagship campus, and as of late, the slogan that Mizzou is for Missourians, when the two are so closely co-located and people interact with each other on a daily basis, and they are familiar with all the activities that are ongoing on one campus and not on other campuses. We are asking the impossible for everybody to be fair and level-handed in making decisions that would benefit all campuses equally. Okay, I think when the system folks are seeing the work in the laboratories, are talking to their counterparts in one campus on a daily basis, on the social gatherings and all of that, they are simply more familiar with the work that goes on one campus than the other. So I think that's one concern. The other concern from my perspective is that we have a number of very, very dedicated alums to Missouri S&T. And right or wrong, they have had for 100+ years, they've had this notion that we are not fared evenly, fared well when we are a part of the campus. I'll say it here, that a lot of our alums who want to give to our university, they hesitate. In fact, they come out and say that I like to write a check to Missouri S&T and not to the Missouri system. And as long as I have to do that, I'm going to stay on the sidelines. Those are the other. That is another major issue from our alumni base that we hear. My sense is that you will hear more about that. We can convince ourselves through conversations, very helpful conversations of this nature, but we cannot reach out to every single alum and have an detailed explanation of this is why and this is how, and it is going to be fair no matter how close the system and one campus is. I just think that these problems are going to linger on. And again, I, for one, have had those issues when the system and Mizzou were separated from one another. And I don't know what's going to happen when the two are combined. I just think that we have a lot more work ahead of us in order to explain and convince people that the gain is better than the alternative. The gain makes the alternative, this approach, worthwhile, and convince them that something bigger will not break. People are worried about all the unintended, unwanted consequences of a massive move like this. Just my thoughts.
Mo, this is Steelman. Can I ask a question? And this may take a little while, it may not be fair. Do you have any ideas right now on how we could move forward to explain and convince? Do you have any, and if not, that's up to us to circle back around to you. But you and I have talked about this way before this issue came up, is we have major donors to S&T who believe that S&T would be in far better shape if the system didn't exist. So how can we address that? Because I don't think that has to be true. So how do we address it and at least make a good faith effort to try to persuade those donors, just as you said? Do you have any ideas on process or what we need to do?
Well, I just think that it takes a long time, very frankly, very carefully, diligently, and continually. I think the message needs to be delivered on a continual basis, and any gain that has been made and will be made all along the way, that needs to be broadcasted right away. That here is a benefit of what happened. Here's another benefit that we didn't think was going to happen, happened. And then engaging them. Every campus has their own trustees. I know we do. We have a very active and engaged trustees. We need to convince them and recruit them to be ambassadors for us to convey the message to others. But Curator Steelman, I tell you, it is going to be a difficult challenge. As you know, there is a lot of faith and confidence in President Choi. But the follow-up immediate question is that what if the person after President Choi or farther down the line will be someone that is not as even-handed and thoughtful as President Choi. So this has to be structurally sound and not individual dependent. And that's what they're, the immediate question for them will be, okay, now we are convinced for now, but what is going to happen 20, 30, 40 years from today? So the answer is, I think it's just methodically, carefully, and continually, we need to work it and recruit other people to serve as ambassadors for us.
Can I add, and I don't want to belabor this too much, because there's been a thread running through the entire conversation, which is kind of to Congress to me. At one hand, I know the trustees at S&T, and at one hand, they say, we got to be very careful, and brought up the problems you've brought up. On the other hand, those same trustees have believed very strongly that our system has not worked. So since there is a great deal of consensus out there among trustees at every campus that our present system is not working, Mo, doesn't that make it somewhat incumbent upon us to try to make it work better through structural changes?
Oh, I mean, look, of course, I am all for any change that will enlist our alums, constituencies more closely with that change. My concern is that it's going to be hard, and communication needs to happen on a continual basis, because in the absence of communication, people make up their own, and it's usually of the worst variety. And I think that will be a massive challenge for us to say, because Curator Steelman, they're all hoping for more autonomy. I don't know what that means, frankly, but that's the word on the street, as you know. Now, if we'll go the other way around, then they're going to be convinced immediately. Their immediate reaction is that, okay, we are now more of a satellite campus rather than an independent university.
Any commentary from either Terry or Rich to this?
Sure. Mo is spot on when he talks about the challenge of selling this thing. I initially used the word impossible, and then he went over to difficult, but it's certainly going to be a challenge. If there are ways not just to try to sell this thing for its putative advantages, but very specific things that are wins for those campuses. And I can imagine some bullets underneath that statement, but I'll save them. So that there was a positive to this, not just a response to COVID-19, that there was, benefits in terms of quality, perception, program franchises, et cetera. That would help to make this go down. And if it's, people say, well, we should focus more on the qualitative benefits, functional benefits of this. Man, I think you folks are going to be facing a financial tsunami, and to focus over much on perceptions of fairness when we're talking about keeping faculty and staff employed and having affordable tuition for students, which are the big challenges, then we're a little bit off base. But I think Mo's guidance or warning or caveat, whatever, about the perceptions of fairness and identifying the positives, genuine positives in this thing is well worth heeding.
I don't have much to add other than, again, I think one of the benefits that S&T could see as an opportunity is collaborative research, which again, I think by having the President and Chancellor position combined, and I think again, of Next Gen, the health initiative, but I think of other opportunities, if the President becomes fairly close with the Columbia faculty in a positive way, I think that will open the door for collaborative opportunities for collaborative research with the other institutions. I may be, maybe that's up in the clouds and doesn't sound that feasible to you, but I think that's one selling point, that within a system under this kind of administrative structure, that the opportunities for collaboration increase. And teaching as well. And I know that with the special engineering programs at S&T, it may not happen in engineering. The other thing I know, Mo, we talked about in our interview was in terms of the fundraising, if it's acceptable to the system. I don't know why S&T does not have a separate foundation by which the alumni could make, it would increase donations, you'd have a foundation board that would do fundraising. If that's acceptable to the system, I don't know what happens now. Maybe money goes to Columbia in a designated account for S&T, but if it's possible and acceptable to the Board of Curators and to President Choi, I would see that having a separate foundation to fundraise, the foundation board would fundraise and also help manage the assets, would be a real benefit. And maybe some of those trustees that you have could serve on the foundation board. Again, I don't think it does anything to separate S&T from the system, but it gives a sense of identity and autonomy that might not exist now. And also, more revenues if there are alumni who and other individuals who want to give to S&T, it will help close some budget gaps and create some margins of excellence that may not exist now.
Hey, I'd like to ask Ryan, does each campus have a foundation already?
No, UMKC is the only one with a foundation. And then now donors can give and obviously restrict their gift to just S&T or to UMSL. I think there's pros and cons to all of this. I think one of the advantages that we have, at least from a scale perspective, is all of the endowments get combined, and rather than having a $300 or $400 million endowment, we can invest that, as I think it's approaching close to $2 billion in total, or was, across the system. So you see a lot of foundations in other states too, because there's legal requirements that require them. But I think it's something we could evaluate, but I don't know. There's probably other things we could do also to address alumni concerns.
All right, I want to turn to Kristen and see if she has any questions, and then we're going to go back to Molly.
Great. Thank you, Chair Burnsick. I appreciate that. So one of the things that I have talked about during this process is I think the strength of the system across the state of Missouri is our diversity as different universities. We have 4 very different universities that really are able to then serve a much broader swath of Missouri than what we can if we try to all be the same. And so I think that's important when you get back to identity and autonomy. So that's just a statement that I've made before, and I think is going to be really important as we move forward and collectively look at where we can consolidate, is that diversity is a strength. The question I have is more pragmatic, and it involves accreditation. And our 4 universities are all separately accredited. And so this goes to Terry and Rich with regards to the other institutions that you were talking about. How did accreditation, overall accreditation, we're all from the Higher Learning Commission, feed into any kinds of consolidations? And I will say too that I have not received the AGB report, so I have not had a chance to read your report in advance.
Rich, you want to take that first, and then I'll add whatever's appropriate.
Yeah, single accreditations are not uncommon, again, in the integrated research universities that we mentioned, the 14. I don't know the exact number of those 14, which include, again, Ohio State, University of Michigan, Indiana, New Mexico State, Washington State, and a few others. They tend to be in the Big Ten and Pac-10 conferences, but those that have a single accreditation are highly integrated academically, as not surprisingly. It would be more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult for 4 different universities, as you just mentioned, in Missouri, to move to a single accreditation. That would take a lot of academic consolidation. It would be a heavy lift, and if everyone agreed to it, sure. I'm sure the Higher Learning Commission and Barbara Gelman-Danley could be, who runs at HLC, could be consulted on that if you wanted to go in that direction. The integrated universities that have this single accreditation, it wasn't done after the fact. It was done as that university grew and as they created branch campuses, and they continued common course numbering and a common curriculum across the regional institutions in addition to the main flagship. So it was an evolution from the very beginning of the main campus. And it wasn't something they decided later, okay, let's try to get an institutional accreditation from this disparate and differing group of institutions. Now, as Terry said, the University of Maine considered that, and maybe they're still struggling with it. LSU thought about it and said, nah, it's too big a lift. I believe Terry said the University of Alaska also thought about it for its 4 institutions and thought, maybe we'll defer that to later. So it's possible, but it would take an agreement among the 4 institutions, a solid agreement before proceeding and going to HLC. Terry?
That's a bridge way too far right now. There are a lot of good things you can do to address the immediate problems without taking on that. It's way too complicated for the payoff at the moment.
But and if I understand part of Kristen's question, and maybe I don't, so I don't want to suppose I do, but if we were to consolidate some academic programs, would that require necessarily that we all have the same accreditation, or can that be done with the 4 different universities in terms of, say, online classes? And you had mentioned earlier about, having the best whatever department, the provider of the online content, and having a student at one university be able to take the course that's offered through another university and having the credits essentially accepted at the other. Do you need the same accreditations for that?
Well, there are all 4 universities are accredited by something called the Higher Learning Commission. So that, they're all under the, working with the same agency. I think where it might get tricky in the instance you described, Chair Bernsick, is for professional accreditation, business, engineering, and a number of other fields. My own view is accreditation won't be a barrier to that, but you want to have conversations early and often with the accrediting agency, because the result of those combinations would probably be stronger programs, more faculty, more availability to students. That would certainly be a top priority for doing it. So, and that's what accreditation is presumably about, is sustaining and improving quality.
Thank you. I want to turn to Ryan before we go back to Molly and elicit more questions from Molly, because I think Ryan had a question.
Yeah, Terry, I just, you kind of open with the challenges we face in terms of resources. And, in a state where you talked about falling appropriations, declining resources, and then, understanding that the historical role of systems was largely to allocate and prioritize those state resources. How have you seen similar systems facing these challenges respond, or are others not there yet?
Great question, Ryan. I hesitate to say this, but I will. There are a lot of boards out there that are still in some state of denial. Not just boards, frankly, but some chief executives who underestimate or don't want to grapple with the immensity of the financial problems that they're facing. There's a kind of overwhelmed, we've had this wave of crises, right? COVID-19, the financial fallout, the demonstrations over racial injustice and violence, and there seems to be a kind of shock reaction. The fact that you're stepping out on these issues is a credit to this board. If I had a message there, it's I'm not, you ask yourself this, do you think you're honestly recognizing the immensity of the financial problems on your doorstep and the need for significant change to address it? That doesn't mean pull the trigger too soon, but it does mean there's got to be, this is not business as usual, and personally, you come to your own judgment, it ain't going to go back to normal anytime soon.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, I think, Ryan, I think we discussed this maybe in the interview, that when you have revenue shortfalls, there's only two options. You've got either, reduce costs or increase revenues from somewhere else. There may be some market opportunities that individual institutions can identify. Maybe it's the adult population that has some college or doesn't have a degree that could come to campus. Maybe it's online opportunities in state or out of state. Maybe there's, market sensitive programs, be it in the healthcare or security or cybersecurity, that an institution could offer and reach a market that has heretofore not been reached. But I think in this crisis, as Terry says, and as you probably know, Ryan, it's going to be on the cost cutting side that really where most of the dollars will have to come from. I agree with Terry that a lot of boards, both system boards and individual institution boards and private college boards, quite frankly, in that the non-selective privates I mentioned earlier, who are the most susceptible to what's happening in the economy, a lot of them haven't quite reached, or they're really struggling with what kinds of choices they're going to have, and are trying to work with their chief executives and coming up with solutions. But how this all plays out, it remains to be seen. If hopefully we have a treatment for COVID-19 or a vaccine that comes along not too far in the future, maybe the economy will be able to reboot and take charge again. But the other issue that all of this creates, and I'm sure for the citizens and the legislature and the elected officials of Missouri and a number of other states, is do we have a fair and adequate tax structure that raises the revenues that the state services need, both for education, transportation, healthcare, social services, what have you? Is there a tax system that is adequate, sufficient, and fair that will help support all the public services that exist? So just to having a booming economy that doesn't capture the revenue through the tax system, be it through an income tax, services tax, or sales tax, it is a critical component of this as well.
Yeah, I was really trying to get after, and you kind of described that I believe cost will be part of it, but I also thinking, revenue growth has to be part of that. But knowing that most of that revenue growth is probably going to come from paying students and their families, and less is coming from the state. How does that change? To me, that has to present some fundamental shift in the system, or system's role over what it historically was. Because you mentioned, at one point we were at 70% state support. Now we're approaching 30. And to me, I was just curious if you're seeing other systems wrestle with that same challenge of maybe how they're allocating resources is of less importance as it once was.
At least a comment, Ryan. The debate between is over a kind of appropriations mentality versus a business mentality waxes and wanes, across the country. Now it's become more intense lately. The perception that are we being treated unfairly, or would we be treated unfairly if these positions were combined, has a kind of subtext of we'll get less of the money, or if there's new money, we won't get that. Well, when you're only getting 30 cents on the dollar of your costs, that's kind of missing the point. The question, to my mind, the question should shift to market opportunities. Will the system give us the franchise, if you will, to run these programs, which I'll go further and say with some differential tuition or high demand, third-party payments will allow us to bring in more revenue. That's the mentality going forward. And the campus chief executives tend to fall on one side of the line or the other. Either we're safeguarding a legacy concept of the university, which is a wonderful thing, or we're also going to emphasize the business side of this enterprise so we get the resources to sustain our academic excellence and access. So it's not exactly in the rails of our study, but a lot of it has to do with the leadership mindset.
This is sort of an aside, Ryan. I and a colleague, when we were in an economic recession in the early 1990s, excuse me, did an article for a journal on the Great Depression and what that meant for public universities and the States. And the questions asked by state leaders in the 1930s were very similar to what is being asked today. And that was, how are universities governed? How are they administered? And what is the cost structure within public universities, and how could it be changed to save money? There was a wonderful publication in 1934 called Economy in Higher Education that looked at and surveyed several public universities and categorized the costs in large athletic programs, in large research universities, and classroom situations, that what have you. I say that just not to say that history points a way forward to this crisis now, because I think the crisis now is different. Although there's many parallels, the crisis now is different. I do think how this plays itself out will really have an impact on how governing boards comport themselves, be it a system, a single private institution, or a single public governing board. Boards, as I think Terry referenced this earlier, really do have to be much more engaged with their chief executive, with their faculties, with their students, with their communities, to help guide, lead, and strategize for the future, because it's going to be difficult.
Thank you.
So I have one last comment, if I may. There is the suggestion has been made that the president chancellor combined position should meet with the faculty and other campuses and so on. And I think we've had that in President Choi and has worked very nicely. But I suggest a much more impactful and meaningful and longing measure needs to also be implemented. The notion right now is that every major system level initiative that happens at Mizzou's campus. A good example, of course, is the Next Gen project. I suggest that we think of similar broad-based system-supported initiative at other campuses, depending on their strength. We ought to be able to say, well, here is the long-lasting impact of being a part of the system. We just received a, you name it, multi-scale imaging capability, which promises to be second to none in the nation. Very similar to what we do with Next Gen. Right now, the notion is that if there is any such thing, the mothership will be the recipient of that and not the rest of the campus. I think that will speak volumes in going to our constituencies and say, here is the real significant benefit. Now, to be fair, I have only been here less than a year, and I've seen the benefit of system contribution to our research that has happened. But I'm talking about a four-way highway rather than, okay, here is several $1 million. Major initiatives that can be located. I mean, for example, I know Kansas City has data science strength. We have engineering. UMSL has other strength. If we can think as a system of the future projects that can be located on those campuses and announce those alongside with the changes that we are going to make, so people will step outside of their fear zone and look towards a positive impact that is on the way because of the change that you're. That'll go a long way. A lot more impactful than just us talking to our faculty and trying to convince them that this is the right thing, the good thing, and the austerity that we need to be thinking about right now. I'm just putting that suggestion on the table as well.
I could jump in there. I think, first of all, let me just say something about Moon, because that is something that a lot of us are worried about on our campus, is that we may do this based on Moon's capabilities. Moon is an individual where if you gave him chancellorship of all 4 institutions, he most probably could do it himself. But the word on the street is that he was the original choice for the Energizer commercials, but he declined. But we need to have specific wins articulated for each institution as we do this, and not just hypothetical or on the paper wins, just like what Mo was suggesting. The other piece I wanted to just comment on, and I think Terry talked about it, the Council of Chancellors idea was one that I had floated. And just to clarify, I'm not saying that should be counter to the powers of the president, but supplement that. And all I'm saying is that there needs to be, as we consolidate power in one place, we need to have some counterbalances so other institutions actually have a voice someplace where now Moon is doing that. In the past few months, he's been very good at that. But if we somehow codify that, and here's my concern, and I've seen it at other institutions and systems. If you have more power in one place, then behind the curtain, behind that person, is a whole cadre of people who are making decisions, because it's not just that one person. And that will be somewhere down in Columbia, maybe at system. And they may not be as prominent, but the decisions will be made behind that one person. And especially if those roles, dual roles between Mizzou and system, that makes it even more important. So I think it's critical that if we were to consolidate power, we do have a new way of voice from the different constituents universities codified so that they have a voice. Again, please, let's not make these decisions based on Moon, because these decisions will be there for the next 5, 10, 50 years. I know the curators can change them, but once things get into place, it takes a while for change to happen again. So that's just something I wanted to throw out. Then one other last comment is, as we talk about consolidation of programs and online, here's something interesting we're seeing this year, at least in Kansas City. As we're talking about the fall session and we're talking about in-person classes or online classes, we actually have had a pushback from our incoming class students as well as parents. They want in-person classes. So not everybody is ready for online classes. And I think the people that will take online and then the people who want in person. So they're not always one-to-one replacement. Just wanted to put it out there. It's an interesting something that we saw this semester where people were threatening to withdraw from the residence halls because we were giving them some online. So those are just comments, but again, this power counterbalance somehow, so the other campuses have a voice somehow. That's part of the change.
Can I have a follow-up question to Molly? Do you have a suggestion on how you would have that balance of power?
What I had said was that decision-making, before decisions are made, if the president has a council of chancellors and they sit and discuss those and then make those decisions.
So you would be suggesting if we made this change to create this council of chancellors, would you give them specific powers, or are they strictly advisory toward the president?
They would be advisory, just like each of us have a cabinet at the campus level, the vice chancellors. The president can make the final call, no doubt. But my concern would be that without that, a lot of decisions would be made by a president with just input from people in Columbia, whether they're vice presidents or vice chancellors, and the other campuses will not have a say in the decisions other than once they're made to say, well, that doesn't work for me. And that just doesn't create the right environment. So I think right when major policy decisions are being discussed, the other chancellors need to be at the table, giving advice, maybe making committees to look at things and reporting back to the president. Just a more collaborative system. I mean, this happens at the Board of Curators. You have a chair, well, chair doesn't have absolute powers, but you do have different groups that look at different things and provide input. That has not been the case, at least in the past 2 years I've been here. Curator Steelman, this is my 2-year meeting. If you remember 2 years ago, my first day on the job was at the Curators meeting.
I sure do. I remember your cowboy boots. I was very impressed.
And as things would go, and I know Moon has been president for a while, but as a chancellor, he's new. Now I'm the most senior chancellor. Who would think that in 2 years? That doesn't give me any more powers. But that's Curator Hoberock, that's what I was thinking. There needs to be active involvement of the chancellors in the decision-making that affect all the campuses.
This is Steelman. I want to say a couple of things. One, I wasn't planning on saying, but Molly, I'm the senior curator too, and that doesn't amount to a hill of beans. So I understand. I'm addressing this to the chancellors as we work through this too. A couple of things. One, what I am worried about, and I don't think this is what Rich meant, but Rich will refer back to what happened in the 90s, and there is a trend on some of the campuses and in higher ed, I believe in general, and this may be what Terry was alluding to think COVID-19 crisis will pass, the financial shortfalls will pass. I personally believe that we have been moving towards the point of no return as far as needing to change for some time, and at least some people like Christensen, as Terry's alluded to, have been feeling that way too. People can get classes online from MIT and from Harvard, and they can get a lot of those classes free of charge. And I know people working at a high level in industry with degrees from elite universities who actually got most of their training by going online to some of those free courses. So all of this is making a major change. And what I would ask all of the chancellors as we move forward and the board tries to move through these changes, if the board as a corporate body decides that Clyde Christensen is right and that higher ed simply must change, that we move together with that model, which I think is different than trying to keep things the same. Because I believe that things aren't going to stay the same regardless of what we decide.
Just two quick comments on what Mo and Molly said. I do think sort of this idea, for lack of a better term, centers of excellence that focus on the particular strengths of other institutions of the system beyond just Columbia. It makes great sense if it's doable. And I think it probably is, because I'm sure the faculty have the expertise and the campus has the access to resources to make those centers exist. And in terms of the Council of Chancellors, sure, I think I'm sort of surprised that the University of Missouri system does not have something similar in place already. But I think it obviously is a very good idea that most systems have, that enables the campus heads, be they chancellors or presidents, to have a voice, a collective voice with the president. And I think that's so important, because individual chancellors will always advocate for their own institution, but together as a group, they can collectively give advice, make recommendations, feel that the system is that they're part of the system and the system supports them. So I think both those ideas are very workable and very good, and would enable this possible administrative integration to be more effective.
Any other questions or comments for Terry or Rich? All right, I'm seeing no activity on my screen. Obviously, if some questions arise after today, we can facilitate getting answers. And we are inviting questions from the public directed to the website that Cindy will put out. We're also putting the AGB report that Terry and Rich wrote, as well as the 2018 task report and a number of reference materials that I think will kind of show some of the steps that the board has taken over the years that may provide some additional context to the public for how we got here. Will be made available on that website as well. And I know that there will be a lot of additional discussions, I should say some. There will be many additional discussions on this topic, and it would be the board's intent to vote on the structure during the July 28th special meeting that we're convening to discuss changes that may need to be made to our Title IX program.
Can I ask, I thought that was July 28th. Did I just misunderstand you?
Did I not say July 28th?
Oh, I thought you said 20th, so it could have been I just misunderstood.
Yeah, I probably didn't enunciate very well.
Okay.
July 28th, that's our next meeting, and it was convened to discuss Title IX. But obviously we have a lot of things that we need to make decisions on, and time is of the essence with the budget crisis. So there's a lot of decisions that will need to be made. And there will be, I anticipate, a lot of meetings between now and then where we'll be soliciting additional community input. So if there are no final comments or questions right now.
Julia, just one question. And you're talking about soliciting community comment. And we are also talking about extensive efforts to get comment from the various constituencies.
That would be my intention, but I didn't want to speak for the board before we've had a chance to discuss all the next steps. So I was intending to just be very collective in the sense that we do intend to have a lot of additional inputs and provide those opportunities. But yes, Marcy, that would be where I would go.
And I knew you would, but I thought it was important for particularly the people, the leaders who are listening to this and who have spoken over the past several minutes, to know that we'll be doing that also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Julia,
we've done some engagement efforts so far. We've spoken with a lot of folks to influence the report, but that's certainly not where it ends. We will be developing a plan, I think, when we go into executive session for what those next steps will look like. And I would anticipate that those would be posted on the website that Cindy is going to be making available to the public as well. I interrupted Rich, I think.
I'm trying to understand how, as a curator, I'm going to get to learn what the different comments are as opposed to hearing them filtered through somebody else. Is there a methodology for that?
The comments that are going to be posted on the website, or comments that are going to be coming in to Cindy, or are you talking about the comments that we're going to be?
Well, you've obviously had a lot of conversations with a lot of different groups. And I'm assuming Michael's had them. If I gather, maybe you were part of them. I don't know. I've heard in the report consolidates some of those, but those are now become all filtered comments. Is there any way, is there a document that has the unfiltered comments that are set by, I don't care who said them. I'm more interested in not specifically who said it, but what was said in St. Louis, what was said in Kansas City, what is said in Columbia, what do the different university staff people say, from the different areas?
Well, we didn't transcribe the conversation, so there isn't a document that I can give you. I guess the answer would be at this point it'd be filtered, but I think the point would be that going forward, we would have a lot of engagement opportunities, so you can just listen in for yourself like we're doing today if we have those meetings. And I think that's probably what we'll discuss in executive session. Anyone else have any last comments? All right. So now the board's work begins, and we're going to discuss next steps, and then we'll make the decisions related to how we're going to move towards July 28th. We're going to consolidate the plan there and put that on the website with the other information that will be made available to everyone. So thank you all very much.
Julia, Terry, just want to say it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with the curators of the University of Missouri again. Thank you for the opportunity.
Likewise, as Terry says it all, I agree. Nice to be with you.
I think that was a great presentation,
It
gentlemen.
absolutely was. Very helpful.
Great job.
Thank you.
We appreciate your candor.
Thank you.
Julia, are we immediately going to call in to the exec session, or?
I think that starts at noon, so you'll have about 6 minutes.
Okay.
So are you trying to starve me to death?
This is the Baton Death March, and we have a mission.
A quick question of Cindy. Do we have the call-in information, the Zoom information for the executive session, Cindy?
Yes, it should be in your Outlook meeting invite, and it's the same as yesterday. So if you
same
have
as yesterday, same as yesterday.
Correct.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Terry and Rich. Really appreciate your thoughtful insights and putting this report together. It's taught us so much, and we will go put that to use. And thank you, everyone, for attending and for sharing your feedback. More to come.